Screenagers, welcome back to another episode of the Canon. We have got a very exciting episode lined up for today. I'm joined by two of my favorite returning guests. It just so happens that they're both named David. One is a David from my years in high school. We met there. He was on for Dr. Strangelove. If you have or have not listened to that episode. And the other David is a David from my college years, and he's been on for Silence of the Lambs and Boogie Nights. So I'm happy to bring together both Davids for a very exciting movie, a movie that is, I think, very special to all three of us because we're all dudes of the same age, and this is a movie that sort of defines our generation and defined like the time that the places that we were in our life when we were first meeting and talking about movies that excite us and all that good stuff. So all that being said, without further ado, David and David, welcome to the show. We have to figure out a way to go about knowing who we're talking about or talking to. But both Davids, why don't you guys identify yourselves so we can put a David to each voice?
Hello, I'm David Cohan. I'm high school David. But thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be back and obviously to talk about this movie.
And I'm David Wilson. I am college David. And I don't know if it's my favorite movie, but the thing I think is great about this movie is I think the reason I like movies is a movie like this, which I think is probably something we're going to get into. Like you mentioned, that it's the start, like it's kind of the entry point, I think, for movie fans of a certain age.
Absolutely. Well, we're definitely going to be getting into that probably in depth. Have I mentioned the name of the movie that we're talking about?
I don't know, but it'll be on the
They can figure it out.
Name of the episode.
It'll be, yeah. Just in case we haven't said the actual name. We're talking about Pulp Fiction today. If you somehow came across this audio and you didn't see the title for the episode, there you have it. That's the movie that we're going to be talking about. Three dudes. We're going to bro out. We're going to talk about some Quentin Tarantino. It's going to be a great time. You're going to have fun. The three of us are going to have fun. David, let's jump into it. Well, actually, maybe not yet. Let's not jump into it just quite yet. Because, like I said, you guys have both been on episodes before. And I feel like I just want to quickly catch up. This is your guys' first time meeting. This is a weird, situation to meet someone for the first time, just talking about Pulp Fiction on a podcast. But whatever. It's cool. We're going to have fun. So, high school David, I'll start with you. And we'll call you Dave for the purposes of this episode, if that's
right
cool.
On.
Let's rip it. So, last time you were on, we spoke about, the work that you do in the industry. If anyone's interested in learning about, Dave's work doing in VFX houses and all that good stuff, learning about working on Across the Spider-Verse, Into the Spider-Verse, definitely go listen to that episode. But this episode's coming out around the time of a release of a movie that you just recently worked on, Ghostbusters: The Frozen Age, or
Frozen Empire. I keep forgetting too, and that's no disrespect to the movie. I was like Ice Age. No shit, Frozen Kingdom. No. Yeah, Frozen Empire.
Sweet. So how was working on that movie?
It was pretty wild. It was the I've worked on a combination of CG and live action film. We call it live action when it's like using. I might have said this last time, so this is redundant, but when we use live action camera, with CG, characters on plates and stuff like that, we call it live action, whereas full CG is a fully animated thing. So I've done both. Live action tends to be a bit more stressful. The deadlines tend to be a bit more down to the wire. Some of the stuff we do is really complicated, and the amount of shots can vary by day if they do reshoots and things like that. So this one was especially crazy for that. There was I believe it was the largest amount of shots we've done at our studio for a live action show since the 2016 Ghostbusters, I believe. So it's like a huge, over 1,000 shots. I forget the exact number. And it was a huge push to get them all through, especially because after the writer strikes, there was and the actor strikes, there was some reshoots and things like that. So it was like one of the craziest things I've ever worked on. Raph, I think I saw you for lunch right before I started it and was like, no, it's probably gonna be pretty nuts. And it was so much more nuts than I imagined. But the stuff we worked on looks pretty cool. It without poo-pooing some of the other stuff I've worked on in the live action sphere. It's, I think some of the stuff was kind of unique, and it was cool to do giant ghost sewer dragons and like big horned monsters and stuff like that. It certainly kept things lively, and even when they were nuts. And
Yeah.
my team was really great, and so it was great to work with them on this for sure.
Sweet. Well, congrats on wrapping up that project.
Thanks.
Can you, if you have any future projects lined up, are you allowed to talk about them?
Yeah,
Or is
I'm
that
working
also
on a full
in the wraps?
CG film. I'm going to quickly Google to see if it's been announced. I think it has. Sorry, real professional here. Yes, I'm working on a movie called K-pop Demon Hunters for Sony Pictures Animation, and that one's going to be fully CG. And I don't know a ton about it because I start on it tomorrow, but it looks pretty wacky. I mean, it's kind of what it sounds like. It's like a K-pop girl group that fights demons, as far as I know. I wasn't positive that was announced, but yeah, no, it seems like it has been, so we're good there. I'll text you later if I fuck anything up.
That sounds sweet. Yeah. Like that title is amazing. Just K-pop. What is it? K-pop Demon Slayers?
K-pop Demon Hunters. And that's pretty much all I know about it for now. Right. I've seen like a little bit of the artwork, but I'm going to learn all about it tomorrow when I go on it. But it seems pretty unique and more monsters, which is fun. I assume anyway, just based on the title.
Yeah, there has to be.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Well, Davey W, we'll call you, unless that's too much of a mouthful. Since the last time that you've been on, you've sort of taken a drastic, maybe not drastic, but a bit of a career switch. Right, we first brought you on as our resident sports guy. You were working as a beat writer for the Miami Herald. You were doing some podcasts covering the Miami Heat and University of Miami football. But you've since decided to maybe also try your hands at another profession.
Yeah, I went back to school. I'm going to law school. I'm still doing stuff for the Miami Herald here and there. Still nothing in the movie world. Kind of less of the creative world, I guess, that I was even before. But it's been a. I feel like I'm getting smarter, which is can only help in whatever I want to do with it after. So.
Yeah, but you're not fully out of sports yet.
No,
so you can still be a sports
exactly. Whenever you do Remember the Titans, I don't know if that made the canon, but make sure I'm on for that one.
Yeah, I don't know if we have any sports movies. It might just
I mean, Rocky, you probably did, but boxing movies is almost its own thing, right? I kind of think of them as separate. I think of boxing movies as kind of separate than sports movies.
But like no Field of Dreams.
What
are we doing?
Is Pulp Fiction partially a boxing movie?
That's true. We got a boxing in Pulp Fiction too.
Yeah. All right, it's all coming together.
Yeah,
amazing. Yeah, it's kind of a boxing movie. Amazing. Well, yeah, so exciting stuff all around. Happy to have both of you guys back on the show. Happy to be talking about this movie. Since this is a movie where I can only assume that all three of us are going to have a shit ton to say, I feel like we should get to the movie because we should try to maximize as much time as possible with Pulp Fiction. So let's jump in. 1994, Quentin Tarantino, his second directed movie. He had written a few scripts that he sold, I believe True Romance, and what was the other one that he sold? Oh, Natural Born Killers. Yeah, he sold before making / in order to make Reservoir Dogs. Reservoir Dogs comes out. It's a huge hit. It's in the canon, so there will be an episode on that. And then from there, he's like, okay, on to the next thing, and absolutely knocks off everyone's socks in Hollywood with Pulp Fiction, absolute darling, kind of changed the way that movies were made for the next 10, 15, 20 years. Its impact is absolutely insane. And also it's a really freaking fun movie. So in order to get the conversation started, I think let's start with talking about our first times watching this movie, because I feel like they'll all be a little similar, but definitely there will also be some differences. So Dave, why don't you talk us through the first time that you came across Pulp Fiction?
I remember very clearly the first time I watched Pulp Fiction. I had heard about it in the ether before that. I knew it was this big, I was probably about 11, 12 or something like that. I knew it was this big, R-rated movie and that there was a lot of violence and stuff like that. And so I knew that it would be frowned upon by my parents if I watched it. I think at that point I was allowed to watch The Matrix or something like that, but something like Pulp Fiction, I think definitely wouldn't have made the cut. But I had a friend, I feel like everybody, if you weren't that friend, everybody has that one friend who's like their parents just let them watch like whatever. They had like all the violent games and movies at age like 11. And so this guy came over for a sleepover and he had like a backpack full of DVDs that like I'd absolutely not have been allowed to watch at that time. I think the same night I watched Pulp Fiction, we also watched like the South Park movie and maybe one other one that's like just like totally not what my parents would have wanted me watching at age 11. But yeah, no. So I had watched. Oh, and I'd managed at a different friend's house to see Kill Bill before that. So I had, or at least Kill Bill 1. So I had an idea of Tarantino before this, but didn't really know much about this movie besides the fact that it was like really famous and supposedly like really inappropriate. So I remember watching it and me sleeping over. My parents are upstairs, so we're watching it with the volume at like 5, like it was really low, and I was like up against the television watching it. And I mean, it blew me away. Even at that time, there was a lot of stuff in that movie that I didn't quite understand that I understand a little better now. But even at that age, it was like it was like nothing I'd ever seen before. It was just from a filmmaking basis, and like I mean, everything I'd watched had a certain flair to it. And this is just like it's mostly just a movie with guys talking to each other, but like you're gripped the entire time. I mean, when you think about it, it's really just kind of one conversation leading to another one. But even at age 11, where my attention span was like nil, I was like hooked on this movie. So I think after that, I like snuck out and bought a DVD, and then I watched it like a million times.
Amazing. 11's kind of early.
It was pretty early to this.
Yeah. Do I know the friend who was the who brought?
No, this guy was a camp friend from New Jersey.
Nice, classic
New Jersey.
I mean, absolutely,
classic Jersey. Yeah.
Wyckoff, New Jersey, coming through.
Yeah. David, did you have a friend from Jersey who was able to sneak DVDs into your parents' house, or
no? I don't remember the first time I saw this, but it was just kind of like so omnipresent in my household. My dad, for literally as long as I can remember, but like long before I knew what Pulp Fiction was, would always say, "Check out the big brain on whoever." If you like said like a wise ass comment or something, or. I was probably, I would guess like 12, 13, 14 the first time I saw Pulp Fiction. And then, it's easy. It's probably, I think this and Star Wars are the two movies I've probably watched most in my life since then. Because, again, it's just like omnipresent. Like the quotability, obviously the soundtrack, like it influenced not just like movie taste, but music taste. And, everyone, I think for a little while, like, tries to talk like Quentin Tarantino characters too, and that definitely happened throughout like high school, basically into college.
Who's not pictured themselves as a character in a Quentin Tarantino movie? Yeah. I love.
What about you? How do you remember the first time you watched it?
I do remember the first time I watched it. I don't know how old I was. I must have been around 14 or 15. And I was going through like a lot of like 90s indie movies. I think I had just watched Clerks, and I was like, well, now I have to watch Pulp Fiction, just be the biggest cliche in the world. So I didn't have it on DVD or anything like that. This is pre-streaming ages, but also very much so within the internet age.
Yeah.
So I decided to go to one of those websites where you get illegal rips of movies. And that's where I watched like most of these kinds of movies for the first time. The funny thing about the rip that I got from that initial viewing is it wasn't in the right order. It was like one of those clips where there were like it was like the movie in 4 parts. I watched a lot of movies like this.
Oh yeah.
Illegal sites. So I'd watch it in 4 parts.
Because the file was too big or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. So you watch
probably
like
shouldn't condone it on this podcast, but like, God bless.
Does that even exist anymore? Does that even exist anymore now with streaming? Like
they must.
Yeah,
it was
I guess
like,
so.
It was it like Pirate Bay?
Yeah.
Like that was the big one. Yeah.
Oh, shout out to like
great.
Foot Locker.
Yeah. It was a weird like post LimeWire pre-streaming kind of world where you're just getting like all of your music and movies from just the weirdest like places on the internet, but like totally like you weren't like going into the depths of the internet.
No, it's pretty
like,
easy.
It was all very surface level. Yeah. So yeah, I watched a lot of movies in like 25-minute clips on like my family's computer and gave it all kinds of viruses. But for Pulp Fiction, because the storytelling is like so unique in its structure, I didn't realize that I wasn't watching the movie in the order that it like actually presents itself in like the film reels. So I think I watched like the opening Jules and Vincent scene, and then I watched then I got like the watch, and then I got the Mia Wallace, and then I got the end. But even with that, I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. That's great stuff. And it was only like a few years later when I actually watched like a proper version of it that I realized that I had watched it out of order. But it's still like, it matters, but it also didn't matter at that age, like the first introduction to it. So with that, I feel like that's a good place for us to just like jump off. What do you guys make of the wacky, non-linear structure of the storytelling?
I feel like when you're young, it's like you feel like it's such a big deal. Like it was mind blowing. Honestly, to me now, like I don't even think about it. Like it's not the appeal of the movie at all. The thing I like, the one way I think it really works is it. I'm gonna not to like give away one of my recommendations, but I'm gonna talk about like crime novels, like crime fiction, and the way that those books like that. There's always like disparate characters, right? There's the gangsters, there's maybe a detective, there's the guy caught up in the crime, which in this would be Butch, and chapters will jump around and be told from different people's perspectives. It's not necessarily out of order like it is in this, but I think the way that it really kind of cordons off and each individual character's like storyline goes a long way to kind of replicating the feel of those kind of books, which is obviously a huge part of what he's going for in this movie.
Yeah, I was thinking something pretty similar. You know, it's like I guess at the time it must have felt really novel for me as a kid, but I guess because I'm trying to think. I wish chronologically I knew a little better, but I mean, it seems like this movie kind of blew the door open on this type of structure. I think a lot of people, you know, not that Tarantino was the first to do it by any means, but like I think a lot of filmmakers have since kind of, you know, like gone with that to the point where it's like it doesn't even feel like, you know, I mean, it feels like a common part of, you know, film storytelling now almost.
Yeah, what Memento comes out like 5 years later, and like then it's like this feels like nothing compared to Christopher Nolan movies.
Yeah, but I do remember at the time, I think it took like it took like 1 or 2 watches for me to figure out like, oh, okay, so Mia's happening after the first scene, but then but now he's dead, but now he's not. Okay, you know, like I think probably at that young age it took me 1 or 2 watches to kind of figure out where everything fit.
I don't know. I still think it's pretty cool. Rewatching it this time around, I probably noticed this before, but in that opening scene of Honey Bunny and Pumpkin talking at the diner, there's one shot where you see Vega walking behind Honey Bunny in the background. And again, when you're like early in your life as a film fan, that's like pretty mind-blowing to know like, oh wow, that dude is the same dude from like later on in the movie, but you can't know that until like your second or third viewing. And yeah, like putting together like, wait, he's dead, but now he's back, but how? Which is like pretty wild that it was such a novel concept in 1994. Like the medium had been around for like several decades, and there weren't that many examples of, hey, like we don't have to tell stories in a linear fashion in order for us to like, you know, tell stories within this medium. So it probably was like maybe not the most mind-blowing thing in 1994, but it definitely, like you guys said, like opened the door to similar kinds of like storytelling modes within cinema to happen after this. David, you mentioned the influence of like crime novels. Do you have anything more on that? Like,
well, I want to save. I have one that I want to save for my recommendations. I've gotten more into it recently. No, it's a new development for me. No, not like pulp novels, but like, you know, like Elmore Leonard, and which is not my recommendation, but obviously that's kind of Quentin Tarantino's biggest influence. I think obviously he adapts Rum Punch as Jackie Brown, but like that's, I mean, it's interesting because there is a whole generation, like, I don't know, a generation ahead of us or parents' age maybe, that the pulp story is like pulp magazines and stuff were a thing, and maybe this movie feels like even more, I don't know, like it's a different even a different form of nostalgia. I think a lot of we both we all probably have a lot of nostalgia for this movie but for totally different reasons. But the
Mhm.
fact that this movie works, even if you have no reference point for like pulp novels or obviously there's a lot of exploitation movie stuff happening in this that I haven't seen a lot of blaxploitation movies or anything like that, but obviously it's all big influence on him. The fact that this works even without that, and then if you want to like use it as an entry point into getting into stuff like that, like that's what makes it so good is that it is all references in some ways, but it's also so fresh. Because it's B movie stuff, right? He's turning B movies into an A movie is basically the idea behind Pulp Fiction.
Yeah.
Well, all right, Dave, I'm going to kick this question over to you, but David, you brought up that it's like all references, and it is kind of a cool entry point into like different kinds of like genre movies, B movies, different like blaxploitation and things like that. These pulp sort of like crime novels from back in the day. Dave, do you feel like this movie has helped influence your overall like movie taste in any way, as like being a jumping off point to being able to discover other kinds of movies and just like modes of storytelling that you otherwise wouldn't have been exposed to?
Oh, 100%. Especially at that age where you're really still figuring out, your tastes and like what you consider to be a good movie at that age, which would be different than even, what a couple of years ago before. I found myself kind of going through a lot of stuff, because upon discovering Tarantino, I kind of just went and looked at like all of the points that he named as influences. But even in this movie specifically, there was so much that tied to the past. I remember I actually started watching the show Kung Fu because of Samuel L. Jackson's line, I want to be like Canon Kung Fu. I want to wander the earth. Also funny because Canon Kung
get
Fu
into
is,
adventures.
And Canon Kung Fu obviously is David Carradine who shows up in Kill Bill. So it's like kind of funny to see all these things tied together like that. Musically, I mean, I'm sure we'll get into the soundtrack in full in a little bit, but like musically also this was huge for me as it was for a lot of people. There's so much that I discovered from the soundtrack, and some of it'll go into my recommendations, but it was a big like seismic point for me, kind of seeing that. And I watched Coffee with Pam Grier kind of not long after this, which again, probably a movie I should not have been watching at that age, but that was something I'd kind of picked up on. And it's funny to see it like kind of not just in conversation with past movies, but in conversation with his future movies. You see like kind of stuff that goes into Jackie Brown. You see kind of the old war movie on screen in one of the scenes, and that ties into Bastards. It's like it feels like when you kind of look at his movies as sort of a cinematic universe, you can see this one kind of in conversation with all of them. And I hate using that term for this discussion, but
which term? Cinematic universe or in conversation?
Both.
Because depending on which side of the like film fandom spectrum you're coming from, like it's easy to find either of those
That's so true.
either of those phrases offensive.
I'm sure we all had a phase where we were like, how do all the we were interested in like, oh, how do all the Quentin Tarantino movies connect? Reading like cracked.com or whatever.
Yeah.
Because there are, they are like he does have his what is it, Red Apple cigarettes? Is that the cigarette brand he puts in every movie? And with the Vega
the inception for that was just he didn't want to, or he couldn't pay for
like Marlboro
product
or
placement.
whatever.
Yeah. So he just made up all of his own brands so that his like production design team could then just like make it, and he didn't have to pay McDonald's or whoever it was for their bag appearing in his movie.
Yeah.
But it also then opens the door for
there was like the idea of the Vega Brothers movie was he wanted to allegedly he wanted to make at some point. So there is like that's I think for a 17-year-old getting into movies like that, especially at our age when like the internet was like, Reddit was like around, but there were just message boards and stuff. I think it's a big deal to like you see a movie like this and you want to like know everything about it because it's interesting because like this movie is clearly really influential, but like if you Google like what movies did Pulp Fiction influence, none of those movies are that good. Like a lot of them are like kind of like not bad movies, but there's not like any other like all-time classics on that list. So it still feels so different, I think, than anything else other than obviously his own movies.
Yeah. That's I don't really know how to ask this question, but this movie does sort of feel like so much of what's great about it is the fact that it's so effortless. There's no real intention besides a dude who wanted to make a movie about whatever this movie is. Just like he thought up some characters, he wrote down some dialogue for them, he decided to shoot it, and like that's pretty much it. There's no like thesis behind this movie besides let's just make a movie for the sake of like movies being cool.
Yeah.
Like yeah. Do
I
either of
don't
you
know
think
what
that there's anything to this movie?
Yeah, I don't know what like the theme of this movie is, or like I don't know. I can't tell you what this movie is about other than like dudes rocking, basically.
Yeah.
My
Samuel Wallace rocking, you know.
My point was kind of that like LA is just a weird place. Like that's kind of what I got from it. Is like weird shit happens every day with like everybody walking by, and I got that. And yeah, I mean, like I was thinking about how like his later movies, like kind of Kill Bill forward, start to become like more strict genre experimentation, where it's like this one's a Western, this one's a, you know, the war movie, this one's a samurai movie. And I think kind of before, I don't know if it was a confidence thing or like an ability thing or a budget thing, but like, I guess before he really felt like he could delve into each of those genres separately, he was sort of like, you know, let me just throw it all into one and see what happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll make a crime movie, but it really is pulling from all of these different genres that I love or loved growing up. There's definitely some LA is weird to it. I guess it seems like I don't think Quentin Tarantino like went into this movie with any sort of thought of like, here's how I want people to like walk away feeling about this movie. Here's like the emotional change that I want for my audience members. I think he just really was like, I'm going to make a movie because I love movies and this is the only way that I know how to communicate, which I feel like is part of the reason why a lot of the movies that this influenced aren't as good, is because they like do have some sort of deeper intention or they are trying to do something. Mm-hmm. Whereas this is this movie is movie, that there's nothing more to it. But during this last rewatch, I was projecting some of my own thoughts onto what I think the movie is about. And my big takeaway from this most recent viewing was that Pulp Fiction is just about different versions of trauma bonding.
Yeah, there's definitely a thing where it's like you pair off characters throughout the entire movie, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
you've got Mia and Vincent, right? They're like forever connected from her Odin incident. You've got Marcellus and Butch, who are forever connected by the Gimp incident, we'll say. And you've got Jules and Vincent, who are forever bonded by the Bonnie situation.
Yeah, and Jimmy and the Wolf, who are forever bonded by a great cup of coffee and some very useful linens from
some fine
Uncle
linens.
Conrad, I think.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys have any about like other like potential themes to the movie.
Yeah, the one thing I think that other than like you said, like LA is weird. This is probably because I watched like an hour of Goodfellas the night before, which is obviously also a crime movie from the 90s. And they like the movies
also in the canon,
and they could not be like more divergent, like the way their lives are portrayed and stuff. So I think there's kind of a little bit to that where it's like the way Quentin Tarantino, who did not grow up around Italian gangsters, like Martin Scorsese did, is like criminals are like kind of skeezy and like to do a bunch of heroin and get into hijinks. And you know, there's not a lot of glamour to the life of Jules or Vincent. Obviously, Marcellus, that is a lovely backyard he has. But everyone else is just kind of like in dingy motels, and Butch's apartment is like, you know, he's I don't know how good of a boxer he's supposed to be, but I guess not very good if he's trying to make money off throwing fights. But he's not in like a fancy apartment from his work with the mob. So I think there's a little bit of just his, and again that goes I think back to like pulp crime novels a little bit, like that's how they're kind of portrayed in those. But I do think the idea, and some of it is probably just Quentin Tarantino wanting to flex his ability to write conversations, but yeah, people are paired off throughout the entire movie. I mean, from the very first scene, right, with Honey Bunny and Ringo, everyone is in, you know, there's very rarely a scene where, other than I guess like some of the stuff with the wolf, right, when that's 3 or 4 of them in a room together, and the like opening showdown with the jewels and the cheeseburgers. It's pretty much just like 2 guys, or a guy and a girl, having a conversation one-on-one throughout the rest of the movie.
You're spot on.
Relationships.
My first thought seeing Butch's apartment was that apartment would probably be like $2,900.
I know, that's not true.
Well, Dave, as our resident,
you're an LA guy, right? I've never been, so I have no idea. My perspective of LA is based on this movie, Big Lebowski, and White Men Can't Jump. So
here's the thing: all good choices, like as far as painting a picture. No, I mean the thing about LA is, I should say there is, I think, actually a huge cultural element to LA that constantly gets slept on. I think people see it as like, Screenland and that's it, and it's the fact that there is like a vibrant local culture here. That gets missed a lot. But the thing is also, a lot of LA is kind of a reflection of what's shown on screen. It's, because it's a town that was made, as a result of the movie business, basically. It, like some of it really does ring true as far as some of the weirdness and, the fact that a lot of it is just like strip malls and highways and stuff like that. So, it's sort of a bit of both. Like some stuff does get missed, but it is at the same time sort of a mirror reflection of what you see on screen. So I did think about that a lot watching this one. Also, I spend a lot of time thinking about like commuter time. I'm like, okay, well, all right, they're in the valley dealing with the wolf, but then they go down to Hawthorne for the diner. That's going to be about 40 minutes at this time. If it's a weekday, that kind of thing.
Why is so much of the crime happening so early in the morning? A 7:30 a.m. hit seems pretty ridiculous.
I mean, is it 7:30? Do they say that when they get to the apartment at first, it's 7:30 a.m. So
everyone is fully dressed.
Yeah.
And eating
also they got cheeseburgers. Big Kahuna Burger was open.
Guys on like are they on the tail end of their night? Or is this the beginning of their day? Are these like gangsters who wake up and get dressed and then like they just start their day at 7? Like, are they just like total grind set mode? Or do we think that they're awake from the night before?
Well, the other thing I was trying to figure out is like, are Brett and all them gangsters? Like, they're obviously like these very like straight laced looking dudes, which I think is sort of the point. But I was trying to figure out like what their actual deal was and how they ended up with the briefcase, because I kind of forgot that they never really say that, other than that they somehow fucked Marcellus Wallace over.
Which is funny because they're just like dudes.
Yeah. I think that is, again, like if you read like crime novels like that, and I mean like it's like a Coen Brothers thing also. It's just like, there's always a couple of dipshits who get caught up in gangster dealings, which is always kind of what I assumed was going on with those guys. But I guess the one guy has a gun, but I guess if you all of a sudden got caught up in some gangster nonsense, you would probably buy a gun. But yeah, so much. I think that's the other part that's great about this movie. And it goes back to what I was saying, where it's like, you can talk about it endlessly when you're 17 years old and only have seen a handful of movies. Is they don't explain, like, so much is unexplained. Obviously the briefcase is like people debate forever what's in the briefcase, but like you were saying, how'd they get the briefcase? Like, just like, what was Vince? He was in Amsterdam for 3 years. Like, they've operations out there
for 3 years.
Yeah, that's what he says.
I always assumed it was like a week long vacation.
No, because he says he had his car in storage for 3 years, and he takes it out one day and it got keyed.
Wow, I totally missed that.
So that's a huge part of the appeal of the movie, I think, is this, like, it's unexplained. And sometimes stuff in a movie is like a David Lynch movie or whatever. He could, like, if you asked him to explain his movies or like what happened in Twin Peaks, he wouldn't tell you because he doesn't want to, but he could, in his brain, it all makes sense to him. I don't think Quentin Tarantino doesn't know what's in the briefcase. He doesn't know how those guys got the briefcase. He just cares that it set up the situation that we wind up in the movie.
Yeah, and it goes back to Reservoir Dogs too. I mean, like, kind of one of the, not to get too into that one, but like one of the things I loved about that is the heist movie where you never see the heist.
Yeah.
You see before it, you see after it, you never see the heist, and it's kind of the same thing here. Like, I can fill in the blanks on what happened, with Marcellus and those guys, but like they never tell you. They just kind of leave it for you to figure out.
Yeah, there's not really action scenes in this movie other than like I guess the opening, like the shootout kind of. I guess that's an action scene, and then obviously Butch with the samurai sword. But other than that,
Sure.
It's a crime movie where you don't see a lot of like violent crime intentionally, I guess. There's some unintentional shootings, but
What do you guys make of the violence in this movie? Because I remembered it being a lot more violent than what I saw on my rewatch. Like rewatching it for this,
there's only like when they blow up Marvin's head and the samurai sword, and I guess like the overdose, like
I accidentally shot Marvin in the face.
and the overdose is pretty gnarly, I guess. Is the I mean, that's kind of like the most gruesome scene in a lot of ways, because the Marvin getting his face blown up is like so over the top. It's like it's like Grindhouse basically.
Yeah.
But yeah, like it's funny that it was that was like a huge story. We were too young when this movie came out to like know what like the discourse around it was, but it seems like a lot of it was like, this movie is too violent.
Yeah, and I love that like so much of the violence is just accidental or like completely circumstantial. Like it's Marvin getting blown up was just like Vince letting his gun pop off, and like what was supposed to be like a nice dinner out turns into
the overdose. She mistakes heroin for cocaine, right? That's
classic.
That one. Yeah, hate it when that happens.
Oops. And even Butch, I mean, he's sneaking back to his apartment and he's worried, but like, I don't think he necessarily expected to end that day with a samurai sword and two rednecks in a pawn shop basement for sure. So like, like all of it is kind of, it just comes out of nowhere. And I think that's probably why it sticks so much with people, is it's like, it'll be, they'll go from talking about cheeseburgers to like blood everywhere in, a matter of minutes, like completely accidentally. And I think that can be really shocking, if you haven't seen it before.
The GIMP, that's also unexplained. I want the GIMP story.
I'm still trying to wrap my head around the GIMP, but I've seen this movie like 25 times.
I wish I could remember, like, because I was, like I said, I rewatched it this morning. First time I'd like sat down and rewatched the whole thing in a while. The scene where they like open the box, because they're like, bring out the GIMP, and they like do a dramatic, like, guy goes in the other room, opens the box, opens a cage, and then like a dude, just like a sex slave comes out, like. That's not at all how they make it sound like you assume it's going to be like some, I don't even know, like that reveal must have been a total like what the fuck moment the first time people saw
I guess if you're not familiar with redneck pawn shop rape culture, it's just not something that you would have known about. It's going to be very shocking unless you're really plugged into that particular scene. But there are probably like three weirdos who were like, I know.
Well, I guess it is. I've actually never seen Deliverance, but I guess that's kind of Deliverance, right? There is like, talking about exploitation movies, there is like I don't know what they call it, like redneck exploitation. I think that.
Yeah, that's kind of like True Detective
that's
season
definitely a
1.
reference point there. Yeah, True Detective.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess Deliverance is the biggest one, but I think there are other ones like that too.
Okay, back to the LA geography, just because it's been stuck in my mind, and since we have you here, Dave. So this doesn't all take place in the Valley. They're going around to different parts of LA.
Yeah.
Only Jimmy's in the Valley. Are Brett and those guys in the Valley? Where does Butch live? That looks Valley-ish to me, but I assume it's not. Please,
Butch,
explain all this to us.
I mean, the funny thing about LA is that, like, again, like, I think there's beautiful parts of the city. I do have to underscore it because, like, I feel like it sounds kind of backhanded when I talk about it, but like a lot of LA really is just like strip malls and streets. So I was trying to figure out when Butch was driving and where he hits Marcellus, where that would be. And I was like, this could be Silver Lake. This could be Culver City. This could be Los Feliz. This could be a lot of different places. I can tell you that like everything's kind of been built up in all those areas since then. A lot of gentrifications happened. So like it still kind of looks like that, but also different. Like all those like retro stores don't really exist except for in a few places. But yeah, no, Butch, I had the hardest time figuring out where it was. It could have really just been anywhere in the city. yeah, Jimmy was definitely the Valley. I don't know if Brett was, because they kind of go from there to drive up to the Valley, so I wasn't sure if they were already there and going to a different part. Might have been like Studio City or something like that, which is sort of near that area. But yeah, no, and then the diner's in Hawthorne, which is like way south, which I guess makes sense if I think Vince said he's in Redondo and Jules said he's in Inglewoods. That'd be going south, so you'd pass through Hawthorne on the way there. So that part coded at least.
The other part of all this LA stuff, and correct me if I'm wrong, is these are like I don't want to say like the sticks, but it's like they're not in the glamorous parts of LA, right?
Yeah.
They're doing everything out in the suburbs and like a little bit more, not rural areas, but they're on the outskirts they're operating on the outskirts of the city.
No, for sure. And it's funny, like the way people treat those areas in LA sometimes are like, it's like you might as well be going to like, West Virginia. It's like, oh, I got to go all the way out to the Valley, even though it's like, a half hour, and so, yeah, no, kind of, I think those places have become landmarks in their own way because of movies like this. But yeah, especially back then, it would have been like, just the most.
It's different than Goodfellas and The Godfather, where the criminals are operating right in New York City. It's like these guys are. I don't know. Like I have no idea how imposing their gang is supposed to be. Like I said, Marcellus has a lovely, lovely home, but I don't know if these guys are like. I guess it's
unclear what their
I guess it's a global operation of some kind because Jules was in Amsterdam, but I kind of love like simultaneously how little they explain the world they live in, but then also like give you like bits like that bar where they operate out of, like they're like base of operations. That looks like a pretty cool bar. I like that they just meet in a bar in the morning at what time? That must be where do they they're coming from the diner, right? So that's like 11 a.m. They're hanging out in a dark bar.
What's up with everything happening during the day? Do we think there's anything to that, or do we think Tarantino just wanted to shoot during the day, and that's the only time that they could shoot?
It helps save on lights, I'm sure, but like it probably. I mean, it kind of goes back to what Dave was saying in that it's like it is subverting some crime tropes, and that it's kind of taking the glamour away from all this because Vince and Jules really are just like two schlubs basically, and like. There isn't a lot, like a nighttime hit, in an alley looks a lot more glamorous in some ways than like just shooting somebody in their living room at 7:30 in the morning. So I think it might play into that is just sort of like demystifying a lot of it.
Yeah, I think it's like trying to contrast it, right? It's like this shocking violence happening at 8 a.m. after.
Yeah, the idea that you could be scooping brains out of a car.
Like I love
breakfast.
It's become like an iconic like image with them dressed with the like UC Santa Cruz, and I don't remember what Jules like he's got like Zubaz shorts on, I think. Very rare that you see like gangsters in a movie dressed like that. Obviously they're in suits for the vast majority of the movie. Maybe you see gangsters in some movies dressed in like track suits or whatever, but you don't see like short shorts and like a t-shirt that I would wear because I think it's a funny college logo. So he clearly is like having fun with trying to like Dave said, demystify some of the gangster myth.
Do you think a lot of the conversations and just how like conversation and dialogue focused this movie is also serving to demystify it? Because that opening scene between Jules and Vincent, it truly sounds like I was just reading it as two coworkers, and one coworker just came back from. I'm still reading it as a week-long trip to Amsterdam. Like, that's how I would talk to Susie from accounting if she just got back from Amsterdam. Like, you don't say a Royale with cheese. That's pretty wild, huh? Like, do you think there's something to that where these guys are just having like normal conversations on their way to do their job, which happens to be like doing a hit?
I think it's like 50% that and 50% Quentin Tarantino just as a person will just not shut up about a lot of stuff. Like it's just like his whole thing is like injecting as much information into everything he says as possible, whether that's in an interview or like I just saw a video of him from like 2 weeks ago where he was at the Comedy Store for something. He was just like in an audience at the Comedy Store and he's in the bathroom. It's just like a TMZ video of a guy on his phone. He's in the bathroom, like pointing to the old comedians on like the wallpaper. And he's like, oh, this is Buster Keaton. And he did, and like, I think he just can't not do that even with his movies. And I will take a second to plug, like, this is also, I think it's what's so great about Sally Menke, who was his editor on a lot of this stuff, before she passed away after Bastards. And it's I mean, she's just one of the best to ever do it. And I think like a testament to why this movie works so well, despite it being so dialogue heavy, is partially her, like kind of knowing where to cut and knowing how to make scenes move with a rhythm, even if it's just fixed camera and dialogue. And I like later career Quentin a lot, but I think you could also notice a very clear difference from when Sally Menke stopped editing his movies. And yeah, so shouts out to her for real.
Quentin Tarantino is kind of like an 8-year-old boy who wants to tell you like all about his Legos and all these fun baseball facts he learned. But he's like that with exploitation and kung fu movies and I guess international McDonald's menus, which are apparently awesome.
Yeah. I will say, I went to Paris when I was 13, and like the first thing I did when we were on I went with my mom and we were on like the Champs-Élysées and there was a McDonald's there. I was like, we have to go in. I got to see. And I don't even think she'd seen Pulp Fiction. She's like, what are you talking about? I was like, we have to see what a quarterback edit. And it is. They're 100% right. That's what it's called.
This movie has inspired so many 13 to 17-year-old guys going to Paris for the first time and doing the same thing, walking into a McDonald's to see if it actually is called a Royale with cheese. Japanese McDonald's, top tier. They have the best McDonald's. And KFC.
Yeah, I know the KFC is a big thing over there.
KFC is like an interesting cultural component in Japan I've learned about. It's like, supposedly it's like a tradition to get it on Christmas, and it's sort of like something you do on a date. Like it's kind of like a lover's meal, which is really interesting. I think
weird because it's like D-tier fast food in America, in my opinion.
Sure.
I'm Popeye's supremacist.
Yeah. Oh no, absolutely.
It's no Big Kahuna burger. I'll tell you that much.
They do make that burger look so good.
Yeah, that does look like a tasty burger. Which is another line that is quoted, I'm sure, in everyone's household, but all the time in my household. Anytime you eat a tasty burger, you've got to talk like Jules.
Well, do you guys quote the coffee? I think I quote the coffee the most.
That one not.
Because that scene is so absurd, and Tarantino's appearance in that scene is one of the weirdest things to ever happen in any movie.
It's arranged.
I know the purpose of this podcast is to celebrate and lift up film, but let's talk about how weird Jimmy and Quentin Tarantino's appearance is, because it's like impossible to look past when talking about this movie.
Yeah, I don't even know what to say. At this point, I've seen it so many times that I think it's hilarious. It almost feels like intentionally bad, but it's clearly not. I don't know. I can't imagine what this movie would be like, though, with like a good actor in that role, because it's just it's so ingrained in like the way I think about this movie now. His like flat affect. I like that. Like I love like the dialogue of that scene is obvious. Like every scene in this movie is great, but I love the whole like coffee thing. I think that's hilarious. And one of my favorite moments in the movie is when Harvey Keitel takes a sip of the coffee, turns around and like raises the cup and smiles at him like, "Oh, this is a good cup of coffee." But yeah, I mean, sure, everyone knows that Quentin Tarantino originally wanted to be an actor. This was his chance, and swung at 3 pitches in the dirt and walked right back to the dugout.
And yet it didn't stop him.
No, but he goes way smaller with his roles, at least in his own movies, after this. Like in Inglourious Bastards, he shows up and does, not Inglourious Bastards, Django, he shows up and does the Australian accent at the end. That's obviously very knowing, I think. But, yeah.
He's in on the joke at that point.
Yeah. But in this one, I don't know if he was.
He's really going for it with those lines. I'm not worried about the coffee in my kitchen.
Raph, I don't know if you remember, but like back in high school, we used to just like when we pass each other in the hall, we'd just be like, "Don't Jimmy me, Jules."
That's amazing.
Not that I'm looking for retroactive cancellation or anything. I will say in my notes I did put in a slur counter. So let's see what up. I got 31. Give or take.
It is one of the great cable censorships, if I remember correctly.
Absolutely.
I don't remember exactly what the insert is because I hadn't watched it on cable in a long time, but I do remember thinking it's one of the funniest cable censorships, the whole Jimmy scene.
I do remember. I don't remember the Jimmy scene, but I remember how they censored the first scene, the beginning of the diner robbery, and when Honey Bunny steps up and says something like, "If any of you pricks move, I'll execute every motherfucking one of you," and it was like, "If any of you freaking losers move, I'll execute every one of you, my friends." And I remember the "my friends" was like such a specific choice.
Oh man, I just choked on my water because it's not my friends, it's my friends.
Yeah, my friends. I remember that so specifically.
Oh man, the slurs do start. It starts out pretty fast, and they just go with it, right? Like from that opening scene with Honey Bunny and Pumpkin, they're diving right into the slurs and the like gross stereotyping of different kinds of people. At one point, they're talking about laundromats, and there's a side swipe at both the Asian and Jewish community in like one sentence. It's like, wow. What do you guys make of like because I feel like that's a big thing with Tarantino, and definitely it makes an appearance throughout his entire career, a lot so in movies like Django Unchained and Jackie Brown. But there is a lot of that here where his language is pretty offensive, and I think it does turn off a certain like it can turn off certain people from being able to enjoy the movie. But do you guys make anything of that, and like how it plays into the movie? Like, should it be a factor? Is it just how these characters talk? What do you think?
I think like it's hard to ask for it to not be a factor, if somebody feels a certain type of way hearing it, especially if they like made it to 2024 having not seen this movie. I think it kind of hits a little different now. The perhaps overly charitable read I'll give to it is that in this movie, I mean, I think he's really trying to paint a clear picture that all of these people are scumbags. Like all of these criminals, they're not, they don't have like slick back hair and like beautiful pressed suits, and like they're not glamorous. They're just absolute like horrible like dumpster people, and even the best of them is still like pretty much a garbage person. So the overly charitable read I'd give is that like this is how scumbags talk now, and it's how they talk then. So I could allow it to a degree. I will say, like, around number 25 or so, I was like, did he write all these? Did Sam Jackson improvise some of them? Because that's okay. But, like, I don't know, like, all these in the... I actually would love to read the screenplay for a lot of reasons, but that was something I was curious about. I was like, did he write every single one of these? Because I was like, he could have cut a couple of them back for sure.
Yeah, for the most part, I agree. I think it's just like how these dudes would talk. I mean, some of the best lines that I cannot quote are like Sam Jackson on the phone with Marcellus Wallace. But
oh my god, that's one of my favorite lines.
Yeah, I know I can't
I don't
say
use
it,
that
but...
enough in my personal life.
I think the Jimmy part is jarring for one, just because it's him. Like it's like, oh, did you just write this just so you could like say the N-word a bunch? And maybe a little bit. But also, I think the fact that he's not because I guess he's supposed to be like a reformed gangster, because he's like, Jules says he's like his former partner, or his partner or something. I don't remember exactly how he describes him, but I think he's supposed to be a former gangster, like a reformed gangster. But
that's another thing, though. They never really say it.
And Quentin Tarantino does not feel to me like a reformed gangster in that performance.
Yeah.
I just imagine they met at like a Ralph's, like they were just shopping behind each other, and then sort of struck up a conversation, and that was like, hey, I'm going to put this dead body in your driveway.
It's also obviously very pointed that you never see Jimmy's wife fully, but she is black. Like that's obviously a choice.
Yeah. I'm gonna make a jump here, and I feel like there's a part of Quentin Tarantino, like deep down subconsciously, that he kind of thinks that he's black.
He definitely
100%.
wishes he was, right? Like
absolutely,
yeah.
I think he loves blaxploitation movies, like it's.
Well, so I haven't read Cinema Speculation yet. I'm actually picking up a copy.
He's homies with the RZA
of it next week, but I think part of it is his mom was like single most of the time that he was growing up, and I don't know if it was one guy or there were a few different guys who she dated, and he was a black guy. So like he grew up going to a lot of 70s blaxploitation movies with his mom's boyfriend or boyfriends. So he was just like sort of like around it his whole life. And I think deep down, subconsciously, on like a certain level, he's just like, yeah, he like looks in the mirror and he sees another member of the Wu-Tang Clan. Like, he doesn't see a goofy white guy with a huge chin.
Well,
So
he's an Italian guy, right? Tarantino, that's Italian.
Yeah.
And if you think True
Mhm.
Romance, probably the most famous scene in that movie is the speech about the Moors. That was it, Christopher
Mhm.
Walken, right? I haven't seen that movie in a long
Mhm,
time,
yeah.
but the whole speech is about how like, oh, Italians are basically black, or at least some
Yeah.
Italians are basically black. So
He's
I
just
think
been
your read
setting
is
it up
correct.
the whole time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he like, it could have been in that Jimmy role. It could have either been Quentin Tarantino, or if he didn't cast himself, it would have been a black guy.
Yeah, exactly.
And the line read one wouldn't have been as bad because it would have been an actual actor, and it wouldn't have been as awkward because it would have been a black guy.
It'd be really funny if just like
So-
Keith David was sick that day or something like that.
Yeah, he's like,
you'd
all
see
right,
it.
I'll do it.
All right, I'll put on the robe and
I'll
like
talk
3
about
bumps.
the coffee and whatnot. Yeah. All right. That's enough of that. In terms of other sort of writing stuff with this movie, because I feel like most of the appeal of this movie is just how absolutely dynamite the scripting is.
You could
The
like
one
watch this
sort of
movie without
obvious-
watching it. You could like listen to it as an audiobook and it would be great.
Yeah, it's like absolutely bonkers the way that it, like, I think the interesting thing about Quentin Tarantino is that you can't teach this kind of writing. Like, this
He
is
makes, like you said, he makes it look so easy. It's like so disheartening if
so-
you like try to write something after watching this.
his style and approach to writing is so completely singular to him that you can read all of the books that there are on screenwriting and scripting, and like no one will ever be able to write the way that this guy writes, which is just it's absolutely wild. But the Ezekiel passage, probably the most famous bit of screenwriting that is done here. What do you guys make of everything going on within that passage, and Jules at the end trying to like make sense of it? David, why don't you start?
Dog, I did not know that was fake until like 2014 or something. Yeah, I mean that's probably the closest he gets to trying to have like a philosophical message out of the movie, right? Is the Jules divine intervention thing going on?
Mm-hmm.
I think it goes into another thing that works well about this movie is these guys all, in some ways they all are so similar because they're all just like Quentin Tarantino characters, and that's such a distinct style. But they've smashed a bunch of different like kind of like Jules feels like he could be out of a blaxploitation movie, right? Obviously, Butch is
Mhm.
like it's like on the waterfront or something, right? Like
Yeah.
the way that he brings in that component that is like, and obviously you contrast it with Vincent Vega. I think it, like I said, one, it does feel like the closest he's reaching for like a philosophical message out of this. I don't know if it like works necessarily. Like Jules did not make me change the way I think about the world, but
Yeah.
I think it like adds like a layer of where like these guys are like such good friends, but they're in conflict about something. Like in some ways it's like really basic writing, creating
Mhm.
like conflict between friends, right? Even if it's like
Mhm.
minor conflict like that, but yeah, he obviously like he can do it unlike anyone else. Like I said, he writes like a very believable Bible passage,
Yeah.
just like a one-off Bible passage. I would love, because Quentin Tarantino does love to like flesh out these like, he did the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood book. I would love for
Mhm.
him to write the Book of Ezekiel. Oh, I want to see what else goes on in that.
Oh my god.
He says doing one more movie. He's going to need some projects.
Yeah.
the R-rated Star Trek
Oh.
isn't happening.
We'll see.
But no, I remember like sitting in Hebrew school because like I knew that I had that the fake verse memorized
Yeah.
and all that stuff. I was like, I still do. I think I don't know. I have to try it, but I remember sitting in Hebrew school and I'd like open up one of the Old Testaments and like there is an Ezekiel 25:17. It's just like some elements of it are kind of similar, but it's like totally different. I think honestly, I think some of it boils down to what Jules said. I think he kind of rewrote it to make it sound more badass. And obviously tying to the themes at the end, but a bit of both. Like the actual verse, as I recall, is not nearly as like pointed or threatening as much violence.
Well, it's just the fake verse is taking a lot from other Bible passages.
Yeah, I guess that's what it is. He mashes
Yeah.
up stuff.
Which is, I think it's kind of an interesting reflection of Tarantino and like his entire approach to filmmaking is he's like, okay, I have all these things that I think sound or look cool. So I'm going to grab some stuff from Cain and Abel. I'm going to grab some stuff from, Genesis or whatever. And I'm going to take something from, the Luke or whatever. And I'm going to mash it all together. And I don't really know what it all means, but I think it sounds kind of cool. And I think it's kind of badass. So I'm just going to do that over and over again. And if you ask me why, I'll have a hard time trying to explain it and I'll stumble over it. But you liked it, didn't you? Like, it sounds cool when Sam Jackson says it.
I don't remember
Pulp
what
Fiction is cool when you watch it, but Quentin Tarantino has no idea what he's doing. He's just like, I just thought that all this stuff was cool, so I put it into one movie, and that's it.
It's that famous interview clip. I don't remember who it's with, where he's like, where the woman's like, "Why are there so much violence in your movie?" And he goes, "Because it's fun, Jan."
Yeah.
That's the Quentin Tarantino ethos. And I do think as he goes, later in his career, his movies definitely have more thematic thought behind them. But I don't know. The fun part of Pulp Fiction is that there's like we've touched on a couple of little things, but there's not like one thread. I don't think that you can just pull out the great deep meaning of Pulp Fiction. Other than like movies are awesome, which I think is what makes the movie great for a lot of people, as we kind of touched on at the top.
Movies are awesome. Okay, so with the sort of thematic, or maybe the only kind of philosophical element of Pulp Fiction, do you think that Vincent Vega has any? Isn't there something about the book that he's reading is some kind of like old French philosophy book, or am I totally making this up?
I meant to look that up, and I just realized now that I forgot.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, in the bathroom, you're saying?
Yeah. Okay, with that, what do you guys think of the fact that
Modesty
that
Blaze? It's a French spy book. I'm looking it up now.
Okay, I thought it was a philosophy book for some reason. So, because like there is something
French.
to
You think
both
it's
of
fancy?
them. There is something to both of them, sort of like thinking that they are these big thinkers, these like very learned individuals who have. Vincent talks about his moral code of like you don't key a man's car and all this other stuff.
Foot massages.
Foot massages are good or bad. Jules thinks that he's a man of God, but then like all they do is go around and like shoot up dope and kill other gangsters. Like there's really like not that much depth to them, which I guess could be another reflection on Tarantino.
I feel like Vince gives big energy, like that guy who studied abroad for one semester and like Dublin and comes back and like feels like they're like completely cultured on everything. But I think it might be an extension to that.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Okay.
Their relationship, it is a little like, it does feel a little lost. Like Lost fleshes it out way more, right? Like the belief, I don't remember how the man of faith and the man of reason or whatever. They do kind of have that juxtaposition, the two of them. But again, it's like, I don't think that tracks to the relationship necessarily between Vince and Mia Wallace or Bruce Willis and Marcellus Wallace. Like they're all, I think, such distinct chapters, I guess. Each relationship is very distinct.
I was considering if Vince was maybe, again, excluding Jimmy, like sort of Quentin putting himself in the film a little bit, because he's this guy who, he's down with the gangsters, but he's also kind of slick and like, sort of cool in his own way. I mean, obviously I think John Travolta is like very deliberate casting in kind of that regard, which is a whole other thing. The fact that he has all this knowledge of like cinema and like he goes into Jack Rabbit Slims and he knows about every single, like 1950s artists, like I think in some ways Vince is sort of the like avatar for Tarantino in the movie, even though Tarantino is also in the movie.
Yeah, he's the way that when you read a book, like a crime book, usually the lead character is always feels kind of like a cipher for the author, where he's like, he gets the hot lady, he solves the mystery. If Pulp Fiction was a book, like a more traditionally structured movie or book, that like Vince Vega would definitely play that role.
So, okay, on the Vincent Vega front, we still have the bathroom question of what do you guys make of, things always happening whenever he's in the bathroom. Do you think there's anything to that, or do you think that's another just Tarantino thought it would be funny because in movies you like rarely see people go to the bathroom, let alone have like major dramatic action happen around someone being in the bathroom?
I kind of think it's mostly a gag, but there is definitely another element to this movie where it's all about like chance occurrences. Obviously, that goes
Mhm.
back to the like divine intervention thing, but also like I kind of forgot that the way that Marcellus Wallace finds Butch at the end is like he's walking across the street with like a box of donuts. It appears, and
Yeah,
they just run into each other.
he's
Um,
on a morning donut run.
yeah, and that is how they wind up in their situation. So I think a bathroom's a pretty convenient way to get a guy out of the room for something to happen. I don't know if there you can draw anything. I know people have written theories and
Mhm.
stuff. I don't know if any of you have any.
The only thing I thought was that like there's a lot of symbols in the like physical symbols in this movie. You know, the suitcase obviously being one of them, the watch, you know, and things like that. And I think obviously the bathroom is
Watch.
more.
Sorry,
But
totally derail you.
but yeah, no. So like the bathroom, I think was sort of like conceptually kind of an idea, you know, just as like a trigger point for bad things happening.
Yeah.
And also again, kind of going to that demystifying thing, like you don't really think about when the gangsters have to stop and take a shit. So naturally that's going to be in this movie. But yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's mostly a gag. I think it's like 20% what I said and 80% just a gag.
Before I go back to the other or Travolta question, rather, we brought up the briefcase, and we haven't really talked about the briefcase. Again, this movie really lends itself to early internet message boards, fanboys creating theories. Crack.com's entire existence can like be traced back to movies like by Quentin Tarantino and Christopher Nolan. What do you guys think is in the briefcase? Does it matter? Do you care? Is it just cool that to open it, the lock is 666 and there's an orange glow? Like, what do you make of that?
I like. Wasn't there a theory that it was like Marcellus Wallace's soul? I like.
Yeah,
I
that
like
he's
a
the
theory like
devil.
that. I like.
Yeah.
I don't know necessarily his, but I think it has to be something. It has to be the one otherworldly thing in the movie because of the 666 and the way that Honey Bunny reacts when she sees it.
Mhm.
It's not just like gems. I don't think it's not just a bunch of cash.
Yeah.
And it glows, obviously. So I think it has to be something kind of mystical. But again, I don't think Quentin Tarantino knows.
Yeah, no, I like that it's sort of the one element of like magical realism that exists in this movie. You know, it's like sort of ethereal and otherworldly. But I will say something I was taken with because like I watched this movie a ton when I was younger. You know, probably by the time I hit college, I'd seen it like 20, 25 times, but I hadn't really watched it since then. You know, it had been like quite a, you know, I'd say at least 10 years since I'd done like a full watch through of it, even though I still knew it backwards. But like what I found was like growing up, I really, really cared about that. You know, I was like really trying to find out and debate it all the time. Raph, you and I probably debated it.
Yeah.
But you know, and I found watching it this time, I like couldn't care less what was in the briefcase. Like it did not matter to me at all. I was just like something cool's in there, and that was like all the thought I
Yeah.
gave it. And I don't know if that's like getting jaded as you get older, or like looking for different things in your movies or something. You know, there's probably a good point to expand upon that. But like I found like when I was younger, I cared a lot more about that than I do now.
Hmm. I sort of just picked up the theory that Marcellus Wallace is a representation for the devil, and it's his soul that's in
The bar does
there's the
feel
whole
kind of
thing
like
with
hell.
with the band-aid on the back of the neck and the devil's soul or Lucifer's soul, whatever. But also, like, it's really cool to have an orange light glow on John Travolta's face while he's smoking a cigarette, opening the briefcase. You know, like it's probably as simple as that.
Yeah.
Because it seems like that's the entire point to the entire movie. That's all Quentin Tarantino cares about is what would be a cool thing to show on screen.
Yeah.
Do you think Brett and his pals knew what was in the briefcase, or do you think they just stole the briefcase knowing that?
I think they just happened upon it.
Or had, yeah. But do you think they ever opened it? Do you think they know what's in it? Knew what's in it?
Yeah, I think they did.
Okay.
Because they were pretty shook when Jules and Vincent showed up.
They had to knew they were risking a lot by taking it.
Well, yeah,
and,
that
you know,
definitely.
And, you know, like it at least was somewhat deliberate if Jules is saying, you know, well, you fucked him like a bitch, you know, like so it was like there was clearly like some deliberate act that led to that suitcase, you know, being stolen.
Does he look like a bitch? Was definitely for a period of time one of my favorite movie quotes to repeat.
I mean that
When
whole scene is that has like pretty much the like 5 most quotable lines in the movie. Just that run of him, basically his conversation with Brett.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, look at the big brains on Brett.
Yeah, tasty burger.
What a tasty burger.
You know,
They
I
speak.
like
Do they
to
speak
know
English in what?
I like to know
English,
it's a bit
motherfucker, do you
underrated.
speak it?
There's I think like 2 or 3 points of the movie, and during this part is one of them, where there's a line where he's basically like, "My name is Pitt, and I didn't ask you for shit." And then like later on, there's like, "My name is Paul, and that's between y'all." And like there's a couple of lines
Yeah.
like that are kind of underrated.
That's hilarious. I never noticed that, but they're
Yeah, I didn't notice that till this time.
yeah, it's a very dad saying.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's circle back to the Travolta thing, and we can also use this to talk about the rest of the cast. But Dave, you mentioned that the Travolta casting is like extremely deliberate. Do you have anything more on that? And then, like, do you have anything on the rest of the cast and like how everyone like fits into place?
Yeah, I mean it's because I think every time we've ever watched this movie, we've watched it in like a post Pulp Fiction society. So like, you know, I mean, I think how we view that cast is a little different than how it might have been viewed at the time. Because like, I think it's easy to forget that John Travolta was kind of washed before he did that movie. You know, like he was really big in the '80s and late '70s, but you know, he's kind of like his heartthrob status had faded. Like he's definitely not as like as like, I mean, he looked fine. I'm not trying to poo-poo him, but like you know, like he was not as cut as he was when he did like, you know, Saturday Night Fever and stuff like that. He was sort of, you know, he wasn't really getting cast on a lot of stuff. And so I think it was a combination of Quentin obviously being a huge movie fan, but also saying like, let me get this guy who's like immediately recognizable and somebody who probably was once glorious, but maybe is a little less glorious now, and put him in this role. You know, I think it was really informed casting because it played into that character a lot. And obviously after that, John Travolta's career shot up and, you know, is still, you know, somewhat up at least, you know, but at the time, I think it was sort of like, you know, I think really the only person who was in the film who was really big at the point the film was made was Bruce Willis. And, you know, I think that was sort of the star power grab that they got. And like the sidebar, what a fucking good actor Bruce Willis is, but we can get into that later. But, I think it was really well thought out, you know, him casting John Travolta. I can't remember if I read if that was his first choice or if he thought about some other people first, but I think ultimately it worked out really well. I think the energy, you know, to it just really worked.
Yeah, and I think you see his love for like that arc of an actor in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, right? The whole movie is basically about that. The idea of like the washed up, like just because you're quote unquote washed up doesn't mean like you can't act anymore. And that as a guy who cares more about like Hollywood history and that kind of stuff than pretty much anyone, or movie history, I shouldn't even say Hollywood history. Like it makes total sense that he wants to like loves to try to like get guys like that. You know, even Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the stars obviously were huge actors, but a lot of other guys were like Luke Perry's in that movie. Like he definitely likes to like pluck guys who are kind of forgotten. And it obviously kind of starts there.
Yeah, Michael Parks, I feel like is a big one in a couple of those.
He did the same thing with Keitel in Reservoir Dogs.
Oh yeah, true.
Like Scorsese dropped Keitel for De Niro in like the mid '80s, and then he didn't pop up again until Reservoir Dogs, and that sort of like rebooted his career.
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like the Samuel or the Travolta arc is kind of known now. I kind of like never realized that Samuel L. Jackson was like not unknown, but he had not been in a lot, and it was all like smaller roles.
Yeah, he was really like a career character actor.
Like he's in Do the Right Thing as the DJ. Was before this.
He's in a few other Spike Lee movies. He has one scene in Menace to Society, which I think came out before this.
Goodfellas. I think Coming to America was his first role.
Oh yeah, he holds up the Black Arnolds.
Yeah.
I think it's the same year, maybe.
Yeah. But yeah, he was not a known. He was not Samuel L. Jackson at this point.
This movie kind of made that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was he nominated for an Oscar? Did he win one?
I don't think he won.
He didn't win. I think he was nominated though.
Probably should have won. So quickly on the Travolta thing, I watched a shit ton of DVD extra features before this recording, and apparently Tarantino had originally written this for Marsden, who's Vic Vega, right? In Reservoir Dogs. And I don't know if he originally wrote it to just be the Vic Vega character, or if he was just going to have him play, you know, a totally different sort of Vincent. And Tarantino and Travolta had met. Tarantino's a huge De Palma guy, like thinks De Palma's the best actor ever. He thinks Blowout is like the best acting that anyone has ever done in a movie. So he was like, I want to get Travolta back to that sort of level. Like he just hasn't been provided with a good enough script to, show how talented of an actor he is. And he was like, I'm going to write something else for you. I think he wanted him to be in From Dusk Till Dawn. And Travolta was like, not a big vampire guy. So sorry, bud. And then Tarantino was just like, wait, why don't he like could be perfect for Vincent. So it really did work out. In that regard, the Samuel Jackson piece was like written specifically for him, which is like the most perfect pairing of a character and an actor maybe ever. And then like you guys were saying, Bruce Willis as like the one big, star at the time. I don't think Uma Thurman was that big. Ving Rhames,
No.
I don't think he was that big either, but also great in their roles. But what do you guys make of Walken? Like, is this when Walken started becoming a caricature of himself?
I mean, so this is probably the second thing I ever saw Christopher Walken in. The first was the More Cowbell sketch. So he's always been this person to me. So I have no thought. I have nothing to add to the Christopher Walken conversation really. But he's hilarious, obviously, and I love how that speech ramps up the walk. Like it starts off, he's talking normal, and then when as the story gets more ridiculous, he turns up the Christopher Walken-ness of the whole thing.
that might be. Sorry, that's the most Walken I've ever heard. Christopher Walken. He'd be damned.
He's like, I feel like he's kind of like this definitely increased the like meme status of him, but I don't know. I still think he's like kind of a genius. I think there's like, like he really kind of approaches every movie sort of the same way. Even if you go see Dune 2, it's he's pretty much just still Christopher Walken at Emperor's Clothes.
Dune 2, it felt like they got rid of lines because like people just would laugh if he talked. Like he has.
Oh my god! Every time he said Muad'Dib, I was like, yeah. But
he pronounces Baron is great.
Yeah, the Baron. But I don't know. I feel like he brings a gravity to some of the lines that like I don't know. I feel like even though he's kind of ridiculous in his own way, I feel like a different actor would have completely flubbed that monologue. It's like you feel, even though you kind of laugh at the absurdity of it, you also feel the weight of why that watch is so important. And I feel like that's sort of a tightrope walk that other actors couldn't necessarily pull off for that scene. So like it's hilarious that he has a watch in his ass, but you also immediately understand why Bruce Willis is gonna like die to go get it. And I got to see, just as a quick sidebar, I got to see him do like a Martin McDonagh play like 10 or 15 years ago called The Beheading in Spokane, which is this really insane play about a guy who loses his hand and basically goes on a hunt to find it. And he's got like a briefcase full of hands. And Christopher Walken's, it's four people, and Christopher Walken is the starring role. And it's like, he was still him, but like the way he puts power into everything he says, I was still completely mesmerized, even though I was also like, yeah, he did the thing. So like, I don't know. I think there is a lot of power in what he does, even if he's also kind of ridiculous, which is why I actually thought it was good casting in Dune, even though it's also deranged.
No, I kind of love it in Dune.
Yeah, you get the grab. You get it. You immediately just seeing him, you're like, oh, that guy's a big deal. Even if you kind of laugh when he first pops up.
Yeah, Dave, we also need to stop to acknowledge the fact that you do a really good Christopher Walken.
Yeah, that was good.
It's okay. Shout out to my friend Robbie Pruitt from Raph. You might know from high school, but like his one's pristine. So I've learned from him.
We'll have to have him send in an audio clip of him doing it, and we'll just play it at the end of this episode.
That's gonna. By the way, you need some Walken quote from this movie needs to be on your soundboard.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Probably I'll be damned.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
I'll be damned.
I'll be damned. All right. Back to Pulp Fiction. I do have a few more questions for you guys before we get into recommendations. We haven't even gotten to the soundtrack yet, which we put a pin in earlier, and we're going to continue to put a pin into that for right now, because David, I feel like you brought this up earlier, but sort of the influence of the crime novels and like the change in perspective. I feel like you get a lot of that here. Thinking specifically about that opening scene, there's no establishing shot whatsoever. It just cuts from black to these two people at a diner set, which yes, movies have done that before. They have like lacked establishing shots, but I feel like it's so jarring in this movie, especially when you're jumping around from like, different sets of characters doing different sets of things. And the first introduction that you have to them and their situation is just, okay, here's a close up of two people talking at a diner and then they rob it. Okay, now here's a close up of two guys in a car and you have no idea where they're going.
Mhm.
And they're talking about beers at McDonald's in Amsterdam. Like, what the hell is going on? So David, what do you make of the like perspective shift and like lack of like a wider sort of view of what's going on
Yeah, I
in the
think
movie around?
I think we all kind of touched on it earlier the way that this treats the gangster movie differently. And I think you guys talked about this when you on your Goodfellas episode, Raph. The Goodfellas is different than The Godfather because it focuses more on the street level dealings. None of those guys are the heads of the they're pretty high ranking guys, I think, in whatever that mafia is. Pulp Fiction goes even further down where Jules and we'll focus mostly on those guys because those are the guys who are actually like in the gang, are clearly very reliable and important like goons for them, but they're so street level that like, they don't know what happened to Tony Rocky Horror. Jules calls Marcellus and is like, after the Bonnie situation is ongoing, and he's like, yo, help us out. We need some help. I think the idea of the, like, when you say that there's no establishment of like the entire world, I think one that's sort of the point is the idea that this is a street level look, even if it's like kind of cartoonish at a life of crime, but also like it keeps you off balance. I mean, so much of the movie, and this is going back to the timeline stuff. So much of the movie is designed to like kind of keep you off balance, right? And not, it could be a really straightforward crime story if you told it one way. But I think the way they just drop you right in and then like start jumping around all these different characters and different timelines, that keeps you off balance all the way through. And I don't remember the first time I watched it, but I have to imagine that because they show the diner at the beginning and then when they end up there at the end, like that had to be another like, oh shit moment. Like the fact, like that's the one time I think that the timeline jumbling like really pays off in this movie.
Because by the end, you've totally forgotten about Honey Bunny and Pumpkin.
Yeah.
So much, like you watched a woman get stabbed in the chest with a shot of adrenaline. Like you're not thinking about those two random people from the first scene. So it jolts you. It's like 2.5 or like 2 hours until you get back there.
Yeah. But yeah, I like that this is, I mean, Marcellus is a pretty big character in this movie, but it's not about how the bosses and how they run it. I mean, even the Marcellus storyline, it's not about him running the gang. It's about him getting raped in the basement of a pawn shop.
It's no laughing matter. Dave, what do you have on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think
not pawn shop rape.
Yeah.
Well, no. I think it's just really smart narratively that they give you basically two cliffhangers at the beginning to go back to, because they give you the diner and then you do, it's sort of like a big peak, and then it kind of, calms down for a little while, and then it gets, to the end of the Brett scene and they shoot Brett in the chest a bunch of times, and then they cut off there too. So you're like, okay, that's two different moments where it's like, what the hell is going to happen with that? So then he can go do all this other stuff, but as soon as he rounds back to that, you're immediately brought back to where you were, even if it's been a couple hours. So like, I always thought that was really smart. I always wondered if that was the intention from the jump to do it that way, or if he kind of wrote everything out as three separate sequences and then decided to kind of jumble them a little bit. I'd love to know that. Yeah,
the coming back to the diner stuff is because it could have easily just been like three different what do we call those, vignettes?
Yeah.
It could have easily just been that, where it's like three totally different sets of characters, and it's like, okay, here's story A, here's story B, here's story C. But the fact that they are all sort of connected and featuring the same, beyond just featuring the same characters, that it does come back to the original story from a different perspective. It also sort of plays into, obviously, something that wasn't really a thing in 1994, but 2024, we have this internet phenomenon called main character energy where we all sort of feel like we're the protagonist in whatever story is going on. And, you know, you open the movie with Honey Bunny and Pumpkin and you're like, okay, are these our main characters of the story? And then we shift away from that and realize that they're just, you know, side characters in someone else's main story, which again, I don't think that he was necessarily going for that, but just like because of how he wrote and put together the movie, it becomes a theme that we can like project onto it.
Yeah, the fact that Vincent is a faceless goon in Butch's world, like it's pretty cool. Like when you just think about it like that. Again, I don't know how much that is the intention of that, but like yeah, you could have made two separate movies with like you have like it is like it's almost a cinematic universe unto itself. Like there's all these different stories where guys are popping up as side characters. And that is something like, even with all the cinematic universes we have, I still never seen anything quite like the fact that Vincent Vega, who's the main character of the movie, I would say, right? He's like probably has the most screen time definitely has the most screen time of anyone. Shows up for one scene in the Bruce Willis, his story, and gets shot as he comes out of the bathroom, and that's it. Doesn't get any lines, never finds out his name. I guess they run into each other at the bar at the beginning and have a little stare down, but I've still never seen anything like that where if you look
that's
at
the most
movie from two
inconsequential death
for
any like main character of any
movie.
Exactly. Like if it were told chronologically, right, the movie would just end after Vince gets shot. And then Bruce Willis walks out the door and like, okay, that's the end of Vince's story. That's it. That's all we get.
It made me think a lot of The Departed, you know, which is kind of a similar thing where, sorry, spoilers for an almost 20-year-old movie, but like you really don't think Leo DiCaprio is going to get his head blown off, and then it's just in the elevator, and then boom, cut, you know, and it's kind of like that. I imagine that must have been so jarring. I feel like when I watched
No Country is kind of similar also, right?
Yeah.
Where Roland gets killed off screen. You don't even see him die.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like when I watched it that first time with that friend from New Jersey who'd seen it a bunch, I think he may have told me that Vince gets shot before I'd actually seen it happen, which dick move. But so I don't think it was ever a surprise to me. I think I knew it was coming when it happened, but still, even then, it was still really jarring.
It's so wild. All right, I think we can talk about the. Actually, just before we move on from that. I think it's funny that at the beginning in the Brett scene, they're like, we should really have shotguns for this job. And then the job that Vega has a shotgun for is the one where he dies in the bathroom.
Was it a shotgun?
Maybe not a shotgun, but it's more shotgunny than
he had a bigger gun for sure.
Yeah. So we've been putting it off, but I feel like we can finally talk about the soundtrack for this movie. I feel like a lot of the driving force behind what makes this movie so great and so cool is the soundtrack. Also, speaking of cool, we haven't talked about the poster at all, but that's a totally different discussion. We'll save that for the end. But yeah, what do you guys make of the soundtrack and like how it plays into just like the overall vibe of the movie?
The surf rock is so unique. And I think that separates it from a lot of different, not to keep comparing it to like Goodfellas, but Goodfellas did come out a couple of years earlier, and I think it's a relevant entry point as another very prominent gangster movie of the era. But that is all pop music, and obviously Pulp Fiction's a lot of pop music. But I think they make Heroin look so cool when it's Vincent Vega driving around to surf rock after shooting up at Eric Stoltz's house. Like that vibe is so, you don't see that replicated in a lot of other like mainstream movies like this.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's kind of like his approach to the rest of the movie. It's sort of a amalgam of different nostalgic touchstones. There's like some 50s stuff. There's some, like early rock and roll, rockabilly type stuff. There's obviously like 70s, like Kool and the Gang and like, different sort of funk stuff, touching on like blaxploitation. And it's all kind of rolled into this one thing. And then, yeah, I mean, the occasional, something like Girl, You'll Be a Woman Soon, which is Urge Overkill covering Neil Diamond, so it's like a newer, more vibrant cover of an older, more classic, which again I think is really kind of symbolic of the movie it's in. I saw a lot of that going into the soundtrack.
Yeah. I mean, I don't even know what to add to what both of you guys just said, but I think the surf rock element is so insane because who the hell else uses surf rock, especially in a movie that's not about people surfing. Like a totally just like deranged decision, but also Dave, like you were saying, like mixing in all these different kinds of musical styles and genres into one movie, sort of like the movie itself, like, and just Tarantino, right? A word that we haven't used, but is like definitely a buzzword when it comes to this guy is pastiche, which is like his entire, like he is the genre of pastiche. And, we can talk about how he's like a postmodern master or whatever. But yeah, that all also goes into just like how the soundtrack is constructed. I think the other interesting thing about the soundtrack is that all of the song choices really fit the vibe of the scene that they're in, but they're never like, it's never an on the nose sort of choice in terms of song selection.
The use of Al Green's "Let's Stay Together" like during like a menacing Marcellus Wallace conversation is like, it makes you hear that song like kind of totally differently, which is like a great like R&B love song. But whenever I hear it now, I think of Marcellus Wallace and his darkly lit bar trying to get someone to throw a boxing match for him.
It's also like kind of, I didn't think about this till this second, but kind of ironic because that's also in theory when Jules would have gone in and told Marcellus that he's parting ways, during Let's Stay Together. I don't know if that was deliberate at all, but kind of
true,
funny.
Yeah. Very, again, like, I don't know that that Tarantino was thinking about all of these things. Yeah. I think he's just, because like, I mean, the guy only thinks in movie references, and he doesn't have any sort of like deeper understanding beyond just like what is cool for movies. And I think you guys mentioned it earlier, but the whole movie is just like references to other movies or like to TV shows or whatever, but he does it in such a fresh way that it doesn't feel like he's just ripping off of what has come before him, because there is like a real appreciation for all that stuff, that he's still able to like make it unique and his own. And I don't know how that ties to the soundtrack, but maybe we're just on to the next one, unless you guys have anything else specifically about the soundtrack or like how the songs are used within this movie.
Well, should we talk about the twist? Because that's obviously, it's probably the biggest scene we haven't talked about, which is obviously ties in with the soundtrack. Like, it's so random, but I think it fits obviously the whole vibe of the movie. It is like, it's funny because it's a gangster movie, but it's a hangout movie also, and that is like kind of the whole like that whole dinner scene. Obviously it ends with kind of like an explosive action kind of scene with the overdose, but I don't know, like the twist is like this is one of my mom's favorite movies, and it's because she loves the twist scene. Like, it's so out of like step with you mentioned all the ways that Pulp Fiction is kind of like ripping off its influences in some ways. Maybe there's somewhere he got the idea for that scene from, but that is like so out of left field with everything else in the movie that, it's just like kind of unique touch that he can still add to everything, even when so much of what he does is like repeating his influences.
Dave, I was just going to ask you if you think that how much of it do you think is like the Travolta aspect of it all? Like having that guy in that role dance.
I would have to think that, I mean, I don't know if the twist scene was written before this, but I'd have to think Quentin was like, I got to get him to dance somewhere. But also what I love about it is that they basically, they kind of have him like he dances pretty well when the twist happens, but they basically have to like mask the fact that John Travolta is an extremely good and confident dancer.
Hmm.
So he's got to kind of look unsure, even though he's like really good at specifically this type of dancing. So I love that. This idea of like, okay, we're going to have you dance. We're going to kind of bring back to what your heyday is, but you're also going to be like, really not confident about it and kind of smarmy in a way rather than like the center of the dance floor. So I think that's
Yeah.
very Quentin, is to take something familiar and kind of flip it a little bit like that.
Yeah. I really do wonder if that scene was in there before the Travolta casting.
Yeah.
Because with another actor, it doesn't read the same way. Like part
Or
of
maybe it
why
was
it's
just an
so
excuse
great.
for him to film Uma Thurman's feet.
Yeah, another excuse to film her feet. Well, okay. What do you guys make of her introduction? Being a shot of her feet walking into the living room.
Along with the slur counter, if you see over here, I counted the feet shots. Only
What was
seven,
that,
actually,
7?
pretty
I was
small
gonna say,
number for this one.
you got multiple Uma Thurman feet. You've got. Do you see Travolta? Do they do a close up on Travolta's feet? I guess when he takes off
With his socks
his
on.
shoes, yeah, with the socks, if that counts. I'm trying to remember when else there are feet shots.
I think most
It
of them
must
are
ju-
Umas.
Yeah, they
It
must
must
all
just
be
be Uma
her.
because we don't get.
Fabienne.
A little bit
You
of
see Fabienne.
Fabienne, the French lady in the bed.
Yeah. What do you guys make of her? She's hilarious, but also kind of like insanely annoying. But I don't like saying that a woman character is only there to be annoying, or that my only take on her is that she's an extremely annoying figure.
I mean, I think she's kind of supposed to be a little bit out of touch with reality because that's how this all happens. She completely misses the watch, and that's like the impetus for everything. I will say what I thought was interesting about that scene is it's like maybe the only time in any Tarantino movie where there's like a scene of like genuine, not sinister romance. It's like there's just like kind of I mean, I guess not a full sex scene, but like kind of leading up to it at least. It's like the only time that there's actual like as far as I can remember, like any kind of like sexual tenderness in one of his movies that doesn't lead to something horrifying. So I always thought that was kind of funny. I don't know if he set out to do that or if it was just sort of a means of getting to an end. But yeah, no, she's hilarious. The movie wouldn't be the same without her.
I feel like even making her French, that's like another, like it's a Quentin Tarantino reference. I'm sure there's some French movie I've never seen that it's a reference to. Like it couldn't just be an American, like a LA girl. It had to be some foreign reference to one of his foreign film influences, I'm sure.
Yeah, she's probably based on a character in some Godard movie or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Could be.
But what do we know? We're just a couple of American film bros.
Ooh, like that. Hold on, I wrote down that one line from Butch. I'm an American, honey. Our names don't mean shit.
That is one of the best lines.
That is an underrated
I
great line.
Noted that one today.
Yeah.
That one, the two lines that I loved this time that I like had never thought much about, that and the wolf at the end saying, just because you are a character doesn't mean you have character. Those are two that I don't think of a lot, but I love that one.
Yeah.
One that Butch's girlfriend said that I never picked up on before, when she's talking about wanting a pot belly, and Butch is like, but it doesn't look sexy. And she says something along the lines of like, it's such a shame that what we find attractive or what we find like sensual to the touch is not the same as like what we find like sensual to like its appearance, which I don't know what to make of it. I just thought it was kind of an interesting like line of dialogue about just how we sort of view, attraction to people.
Sounds like something a guy who's really into feet would write.
Oh yeah, big time. No, but it's true. It is like, again, like one of the only times where like there's any kind of rumination on this stuff in any of his movies, to my knowledge. Like, I'm trying to think of another.
Yeah, I mean, Jackie Brown is a little sexy, but
Jackie Brown. It's been a really long time since I've seen it.
But that scene and that character is like, that is the most just like earnestly tender that he is when writing like a relationship between two people romantic,
and nobody's sucking on toes or anything.
No one's sucking on toes, but it does lead to some really bad sex.
Sure.
I can't even say it's not sex. It leads to rape. Pawn shop
I will.
rape. Yeah.
Going back to the soundtrack, it was such a a mixed feeling watching that part because the part in the basement because the song Comanche by the Revels comes on, and like that's
Mhm.
probably my favorite song in the whole soundtrack. You know, the da 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 da, you know, and
Yeah.
it comes up. I was like, oh yeah, this part, and then like somebody's having something horrifying about the other room. It's like, oh, but yeah,
Yeah. Nah, man, I'm pretty fucking far from okay.
you're
Another
fucking
great
horrible.
line. Okay, well, I'm just looking through my notes because they're a little all over the place, and I just want to make sure that we got everything. I think we have everything that I had, besides the fact that people forget that Danny DeVito is a producer on this movie.
Yeah, I
It
didn't
doesn't
know
get
either.
talked about enough. Do you guys have anything else that you wanted to bring up that we have not yet discussed?
I think that's pretty much everything I've got. We didn't mention Steve Buscemi. Oh, Raph just gave a thumbs up, and we got fireworks going on his screen. We didn't mention Steve
That's
Buscemi's little
wild.
cameo.
Wait, is that?
We did mention Steve Buscemi's
Buscemi
little
as
cameo
Buddy Holly.
as Buddy Holly. I love the whole Jackrabbit Slims scene. I like that's the. It's kind of funny. Not a lot of like crazy camera stuff in this movie, but they do a tracking shot going in at Jackrabbit Slims, which again I
Mhm.
watched Goodfellas like the first hour of it the night before, and it was a funny juxtaposition between that and the Copacabana, which is obviously this glamorous club, and then in Pulp Fiction he does it with like a novelty restaurant basically. So I thought that was kind of funny, and I think continues to harp on that theme that I've gotten to a couple times about how it's or we've all harped on that it's kind of undermining a little bit the gangster mystique.
Yeah, that's good you mentioned that because I was thinking, yeah, the only two times it's almost entirely fixed camera in this movie. The only two times I can think of where there's really a lot of moving camera are the point you said and the point where Butch grabs the samurai sword. I forget if that's one full shot or if they cut a little bit, but like it's kind of really only to like follow characters into sort of an unknown area, kind of whether it's literal or more conceptually. And so I thought that was interesting. You know, I thought the times where they implemented moving camera was really effective.
The Overdose actually has some good handheld stuff
Yeah, true.
with
Yeah.
going back and forth between as they're yelling at each other.
Yeah, that one shot within the house. Also, the shot of from within the house when the car crashes outside is hilarious.
I forgot
And
how
then, like,
much
the
he
camera
fucked the
goes
front of
out.
the house up.
Yeah.
Eric Stoltz is kind of great in this movie.
Oh, he's
He's
so good.
amazing in it.
And so is Rosanna Arquette.
Do you think Eric Stoltz is doing a deliberate sort of nod to Cobain with like his whole look? Or am I reading too much into that?
Well, I wonder if that look was just kind of popular at the time. I think that was. I don't know if Cobain was dead by the time this movie came out, but it was the same year.
Yeah, it might have been around the same time. So there wasn't like the same kind of mystique around him.
Mhm.
What do you guys make of the different weapons that Bruce Willis goes through in the pawn shop? Like they're all references to different movies that Tarantino loves. Apparently, the bat is The Untouchables. There's a chainsaw for Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I forgot what the others are.
There's a hammer.
There's a
Obviously,
hammer.
the samurai sword to like. Yeah, what's the hammer for? Thor. Big fan of Kenneth Branagh's
Yeah.
Thor.
I guess it was
the
ahead of Old Boy,
Avengers.
so it wouldn't be that.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what the hammer's for. And then the katana for like just all samurai movies.
Do you think that was a
Just
Hanzo
blanket.
sword?
I think that like there was probably a crack.com article about how that was a Hattori Hanzo sword.
Yeah.
And then there's the theory about how the characters within the Kill Bill universe are like based on the Fox Force 5 TV pilot that Mia Wallace shot, which is like a little too deep for me. I love a good fan theory, but that's just That's a little too much for me to get into.
I don't think so, but I will note that the bar that Bud works in Kill Bill 2 is the same set as the bar in this movie. Take that for how you will. I think that's in like Texas or some shit, so I don't think it's meant to be the same bar, but it very clearly looks like the exact same bar.
I love it. Okay, another funny piece of trivia that I learned while watching all the DVD extras. Apparently, the Jules hair, he was originally supposed to have an afro, and whoever like on the makeup team who was sent out to go to the wig store and buy an afro accidentally bought the Jerry curl wig. And when they came back, Tarantino was like, "What are you doing? This is the wrong hair. It needs to be an afro." And Sam Jackson was like, "This could actually kind of work." And he tried it on.
I think it really works.
The fake.
I think it really works because this movie I think is supposed takes place contemporary with when it comes out. I think that Urge Overkill song is a 90s song. Vince at one point mentions Cops, which I think started like around the early 90s. But they're between like the surf rock and the Jerry curl, like it does make it kind of feel like the movie could have taken place anytime between like they have cell phones, right? I think Jules has a cell phone. It does feel like the movie could take place anytime from like the late 70s until like modern day for that time, like until the early 90s.
Yeah, I think that's part of the appeal is that it's like it's very much so like not tied to a specific time. It could like these characters could in theory like exist whenever, just like whenever it's convenient. It could be the 70s, it could be the 80s, it could be the 90s, it could be the future. Who knows? Whatever like fits for that particular moment fits.
Since we were talking about like weird little cameos in this, did anyone pick up after Butch runs over Marcellus and that crash happens and cuts to black? I forget if she's with Butch or she's with Marcellus, but like when there's like a crowd around, I think it's with Marcellus. And in the middle is just Kathy Griffin, and according to the credits, she's playing herself. So it's literally Kathy Griffin, the comedian, has stumbled on this horrifying event that's happened, is like pointing Marcellus in the right direction for Butch.
I believe she was dating Quentin Tarantino at the time.
Oh, wow.
I think that's how she wound up in it.
What a pairing!
Yeah,
that's wild. A lot of talking in that room. Holy shit!
Some wild dinners. It's so bad, but in that scene when after Marcellus gets hit and then he gets up to shoot Butch and accidentally shoots that woman. I don't know why, but that's one of the funniest takes of all time. When she's like, I've been shot.
He has a way of kind of playing violence for comedy, because I thought about that and I thought about it against obviously Marvin, but then also that scene in Bastards where the German general's on his knees and Eli Roth comes out to beat him to death with the bat, and how they try to make it like this heroic end for them, but then as soon as he gets hit with the bat, it's just kind of like pathetic. He's just like and like I kind of thought of that when I saw that.
Yeah, he does make extreme violence like pretty goofy. Well, shit. I don't know if I have anything else. Do you guys have any other final Pulp Fiction thoughts? I feel like we could go on about this movie for days, and if you do have anything else, I'm happy to keep riffing.
I got one. But I was debating on whether or not to bring this up, and if this is like out of pocket for this, just feel free to cut it. Foot massages, are they in the same universe?
I want to say no, because as a child, I gave my mom a lot of foot massages.
I want to say no, but closer than you would think. Just at first blush, closer than you would think. Very context specific, though, Raph. Very context specific.
Yeah, but then again, like I don't know if I'd ever give one of my boys a foot massage.
Yeah. I asked my fiance, I was like, if you found out I was giving a foot massage to another woman, how would you feel about that? And she's like, I would not like that. And I was like, yeah, I think that kind of answers that question.
Well, we know how Quentin Tarantino, again, it all comes back to feet with Quentin Tarantino, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yep.
Not a big, I'm like on the complete opposite end of the spectrum from him.
Yeah, no, not my jam.
Yeah.
But if someone needs a foot massage, I'm happy to offer it.
Yeah. I don't know. I do love getting a foot massage. Like when I like go to a massage parlor or whatever and get a foot massage, I am in like no way thinking of that as a borderline sexual experience. But maybe it's just because I don't like feet. Maybe there's a trauma connected to my mom having me give her foot massages as a child, which is why I don't like feet. But that's something for me and my therapist to talk through, not necessarily something for this particular podcast episode.
No, this podcast is gonna be 4 hours long. We're blowing it wide open.
Talk through it all. Well, David, do you have anything else that you wanted to bring up about Pulp Fiction before we go over to recommendations?
No, I'm ready to do some recommendations. I'm pretty excited about the ones I came up with.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's get into it because I feel like we'll definitely have some good ones. This will be a fun area to play around in. So, just in case we have any new listeners out there, we'll quickly run through the rules for recommendations and sort of the whole idea of what we're doing here. But for each movie that we introduce into the canon, we also recommend 3 things each to check out if you like said movie. The rules for those recommendations, at least one of those things has to be another movie. The other 2 things, however, can be anything else. It can be more movies, TV show, a book, music, really anything in the world that you can think of. The connections to the movie of the day can be as loose or as on the nose as you like. We like to get really creative. We just can't recommend any movies that are already in the canon. And we have to stick to 3 recommendations. Anything more will result in a lifetime ban from the podcast. So with all that being said, let's jump into it. I think we'll go Dave C, aka High School Dave, and then we'll go Dave W, aka College Dave, and then we'll go Raph, and then we'll circle back around and just give a brief sort of overview for why you're recommending what it is that you're recommending. So with all that being said, kick us off, Senor Dave. David.
All right. My first recommendation is a movie called Night on Earth by Jim Jarmusch from 1991. There's a lot of reasons that I tied it to this one. I mean, first of all, I think Jarmusch and Tarantino are often in the same conversation. There's sort of like these indie film darlings that came up in the, mid to late 80s to early 90s, and they're often at least mentioned at the same time. I actually don't know what their personal relationship is now that I talk about it, but they're often kind of grouped in the same area. Also, I mean, Night on Earth, if you don't know, is a movie. It's kind of, if you've ever seen any other Jarmusch, like Coffee and Cigarettes or something like that, he does several of these movies that are just kind of collections of little vignettes. And Night on Earth is one where it's the same like hour to 2 hour period at the same time happening all over the world in different taxi cabs. So they do one in LA, then they do one in New York, and they do one in, I think it's LA, New York, Paris, Rome, and Helsinki, Finland. So like kind of all 5 of them happening at the same time. And so you see them one by one. Unlike Tarantino, you see each vignette play out in full and then it goes to the next one. So it's not a mixed up timeline or anything. But it's good. It's mostly these like kind of little like life scene studies, again, sort of like the Esmeralda Villalobos scene in Pulp Fiction, if it was kind of set a little longer and kind of made the theme of the film. So it's like different conversations in cabs and like different happenings that happen with the people in cabs. And a lot like Pulp Fiction, there isn't really a central theme. It's just kind of each vignette sort of goes in a different direction, and it's just sort of a slice of life thing. But if Pulp Fiction isn't informed by this movie or the style, it's at least like I feel like there's a couple hat tips to it, or at least some kind of like semi-symbiotic bond between the two of them, because they're both sort of making movies like this at the same time. And Night on Earth, I feel like, is a little bit more low stakes than Pulp Fiction. Nobody's getting killed, really. Well, mostly nobody's getting killed, and there isn't really any gangster activity or anything like that. But it is sort of similar in that it's just kind of pulling stuff from these conversations. Also, Giancarlo Esposito is in this movie, and he's just terrific. And like, we got to get Giancarlo Esposito out of like the Gus Fring typecast that he's in, because he used to play really cool guys with names like Yo-Yo and be like, "Hey man, what's going on?" It's like, we got to get him doing that again because he's so good at that.
Yeah.
Shit. And I haven't seen him do that in so many years, and I know he can. And so he's really good in this movie. There's a lot of other really notable actors and actresses in it. It's an interesting watch, definitely, and I think it kind of goes hand in hand with this one.
Nice. I actually was not familiar with this movie, so I'm adding that to my watch list.
Yeah.
I don't think I've watched any Jim Jarmusch.
Yeah, Jarmusch is a real
But I'm
blind spot for
familiar
me.
with this game. Yeah.
He's got some ones I like more and some ones I like less.
Other than Ghost Dog, which I've only seen because of the RZA soundtrack.
I fucking love Ghost Dog. I'm a big Ghost Dog fan. It's like kind of nonsense, but it's great.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen any Jarmusch. I should change that. But that's a great first recommendation. I dig it. All right, David, what do you got for us?
My first one I want to do one crime novel. I picked a novelist in this case because I've kind of recently gotten into his books. Mine is going to be the works of George Pelecanos, who people might recognize his name from The Wire. He was one of the main writers on that, wrote like a bunch of the best episodes of that show, including probably the two like most harrowing character death episodes. But he's also I'm biased. He's from DC, as I am. And he has a series of books that I'm currently reading that are called the DC Quartet. One, I haven't read the first one, which takes place in the 40s. The latter three take place, one in the 70s, one in the 80s, one in the 90s, following a white guy and a black guy. It definitely is Pulp Fiction inspired, I think. In the way that's like kind of snake eating its own tail, like these types of books inspired Quentin Tarantino. I think that character, one is a Greek guy from DC, one's a black guy who owns a record store. And you can like the way, the thing that I think makes it really similar to Pulp Fiction is because one of the main character owns a record store. They're constantly listening to music and talk like the songs that like it's the book I've read that like most feels like there's a soundtrack playing to it. Like they always mention whatever song is playing on the radio in the car or what song is playing in the record store. And you know, and it's also the two guys, like the Greek guy is like a pot dealer in the 70s, a coke dealer in the 80s. So they're like kind of like involved in low level street crime and shenanigans. Very colorful characters throughout, and some great concepts also behind these books. The first one in the 70s is called King Sucker Man, which is called that because there's a blaxploitation movie out at the time called King Sucker Man that everyone is like all excited about. It takes place in 1976 during the bicentennial. Like the climactic shootout happens the same night as the bicentennial celebration in DC. And the one that I'm in the middle of right now, which perfect timing because we're in the middle of March Madness, takes place in 1986. It's called The Sweet Forever. I haven't finished it yet, but it takes place during the 1986 NCAA tournament. Maryland has Len Bias. It's his senior year. I'm kind of dreading getting to the end because I know it's how it's going to end. But it's a lot of like pop cultural references, a lot of sports references. Pelicano is a huge basketball fan. The two main characters are like constantly playing pickup basketball. So if you're into Pulp Fiction, you'll probably like this, but especially if you're into Pulp Fiction and also into basketball, you will really like these books.
Yeah. That all sounds right up your alley.
Yeah, it's perfect.
DC basketball.
Yeah.
All of it. The soundtrack. That's sweet. Nice. I've not heard of this guy or any of his writings, but sounds like worthwhile stuff to check.
He's mostly a TV guy.
I know
now
from the Wire.
He did We Own This City. He was the showrunner for that. So he does a lot of HBO.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, The Wire kind of famously had like this all-star cast of crime writers were in their writer's room. And Pelicanos and David Simon, I think, are pretty good friends because like they both went to University of Maryland. They've got a connection there. And yeah, I mean, he wrote, I don't want to spoil The Wire, but like probably like 4 of the like 10 best episodes of the show.
I still need to finish The Wire, but that's a discussion for another day.
Oh, yeah.
All right, my first recommendation, I think we're going to go with an album that also came out in 1994. And I think the similarity between this album and Pulp Fiction is that they sort of changed their respective games and were so kind of unlike anything that had happened, that had come before and really influenced a lot of stuff that came after, for better or worse, which is kind of a theme with like movies in the canon, is that a lot of times you can say for better or worse when talking about like the trends in the industry that they sort of like were at the forefront of. But either way, a great album, a game changer. Also, I think it was mentioned, I don't know if this was on mic or before we got on mic, but another sort of super cliche freshman dorm room poster. And Dave, I think you mentioned that you may have had this one up in your freshman dorm, but I'm going with Ready to Die.
Oh yeah, no, that was a classic. Yeah, no, the one I had Biggie smoking a blunt, blowing the smoke at the camera in my dorm. You know, real freshman. You know, just kind of hitting all the check marks. So that album's great. I mean, you
Yeah.
know, you remove it from the college dorm sphere, and it's still. I mean, you know, it's very much deserves the classic status that it has.
It is kind of interesting. There's no rap in Pulp Fiction, and we know Quentin Tarantino is. I don't know if he's like a huge rap fan, but he's definitely not averse to it. Going back to like the idea that Pulp Fiction kind of feels timeless. I think if there was like a Biggie song in it, I don't know if it would like fit, but it certainly would fit the air, like the time period this movie came out in, and a lot of the sensibilities of the movie. But I think it works that it's a lot of like funk music and obviously surf rock instead.
Yeah. It also would have felt very not LA to have a Biggie song.
Biggie definitely would not have
like,
worked. Yeah, that's true.
Like that's more of the Clash than just like having a hip hop song in it. But yeah, two dorm room classics. Just throw up that Pulp Fiction poster and that Ready to Die album cover, and you're set. You know exactly what kind of guy you've got living in that dorm room. Sweet. Dave, back to you for your second recommendation.
All right, my second recommendation is actually a pretty recent work, but I really recommend the show Reservation Dogs, which is just from 2021, and just wrapped up its final season last year. So it's like a 3-season run. It's not explicitly referencing Pulp Fiction. I mean, obviously the title is referencing a different Tarantino movie, but there's definitely some. I mean, first I should say what it's about. It's about these indigenous kids living on a reservation in Oklahoma. You know, it's set now, and it's really good because like almost the entire cast is indigenous, as are the writers and directors. So it's really of that environment, which I think anybody who did not live in that environment really probably does not know a ton about. So it's really well written and kind of brings you into that world without ever turning the camera and be like, okay, well, here's how we do things over here. It's really like not cloying in that way. It kind of brings you in a way where you can understand it, but also does not kind of trip over itself to make you understand it. And it's following these kids around. It's a comedy, but there's a lot of really heavily, you know, emotional bits to it too. And, you know, it deals with some really heavy stuff, obviously. There's a couple of explicit Tarantino references in it. Obviously the title, also some other visual things, you know, that happen within it that reference some of his movies. But I kind of picked it more because it sort of feels similar to Pulp Fiction in the sense of like, you know, like the 4 kids are these main characters, and there is kind of a narrative through each season and through the show following them. But it deals with some of the passerby they walk by. There'll be whole episodes that kind of veer to talk about like the neighbor, or like, you know, like what one character who's just kind of an old man now was doing in the 70s and like that kind of thing. There's a bit of magical realism too. There's stuff that's really similar to like the briefcase that shows up, you know, and it's kind of like all fits within this world. Also major emphasis on the soundtrack. And really it's just like, it's a really good, really funny, extremely well written and well acted show that it was popular enough the last 3 seasons, but I feel like has sort of gotten missed by some of the overall watching public. You know, I know it was up for a lot of Globes and Emmys and stuff, but I think The Bear kind of washed it out, which I've never seen The Bear. So, you know, maybe The Bear's great too. I'm not going to say one deserved over the other, but like, it's really, really, really worth your time. And the whole thing's on Hulu. If you have Hulu, it's like, it's, I can't recommend it enough. Like, everybody should watch that show. It's super good.
I've heard great things about it, so I'm happy that you're recommending it. I would love to check it out. And it's, I mean, 3 seasons, like 10 episodes each, probably 30-minute episodes. So
yeah. And it's not a long watch, you know, and it kind of really tells a complete story that ends really well. And also, I'll say, like,
Yeah.
it's Taika Waititi produced it, and I know some people have feelings of Taika Waititi now, and kind of some of his, you know, like some of his impulses that kind of don't work in some of his movies. I will say, like, he produced it, but he definitely let Sterling Harjo, the showrunner, really do his
Mhm.
own thing on it. Like, you watch it, it doesn't necessarily feel like a What We Do in the Shadows, or like a Thor or anything like that. Not that, you know, I love What We Do in the Shadows, but like, it's not, if you're not a big fan of Taika Waititi's humor, don't let that stop you from watching this. He definitely like helped bankroll and create the environment for it, but it's not really that kind of energy.
It's not his vision. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
good to know. I mean, he's cool, but you know,
Yeah.
it's easy to grow tired of his shtick.
Yeah,
So,
totally. But yeah, that's not really happening so much in this one.
nice. Great pick. I love that. David, what do you got next for us?
I wanted to pick someone from this soundtrack. I thought Kool and the Gang would be a little too easy, but Kool and the Gang is awesome. I saw them live a couple of years ago at the Miami Open. It rocked.
Nice.
So I wanted to. So I'm going to go with instead Link Ray, who is the his song on the soundtrack is Rumble, which is plays during the $5 shake conversation, or during the awkward silence right after the $5 shake conversation. He's like a 60s, 70s artist. Couple pop, that song is well known. Fire and Brimstone is his other really well known song. Native American artist, actually, kind of tying in well with Reservation Dogs. But he's I think, like, kind of probably because his song on this album is an instrumental. Like, people might not even realize who he is, but he's pretty awesome if you're like are into that, like, kind of early, like the early rock and roll, but kind of before it was rock. Like, he's got a lot of that kind of style of music from the early 70s. So yeah, just I think more people should at least have awareness about him, because he's a pretty influential guy who has probably, I don't know, maybe my favorite song on the soundtrack. So Link Ray, and his self-titled.
That's so funny.
album.
Link Ray was my third too.
Oh, nice. Yeah,
I have a backup, so yeah,
all
but
right,
yeah,
cool.
no, Link Ray was 100% my third.
Yeah, he's awesome. I guess
yeah,
his
second
self-titled
one, for
album would be
sure.
the one I would recommend if you're gonna just like pick one. So
Sweet. That's like the one song that I always like breeze past when listening to the soundtrack, but I'm happy that both of you guys are down with him and recommending him. Nice. All right, for my second recommendation, I think I'm going to go with a movie. Also a movie from 1994 that also sort of deals with interconnected storylines and the chances of like chance encounters, the happenstance of like what another person within the same room that you're in who's like a total stranger and all that stuff. So sort of similar in those vibes, not necessarily a movie that's told in a nonlinear fashion, but it does connect to Pulp Fiction and all those other ways that I just laid out. I'm going to go with Chungking Express from Wong Kar-wai, which is an absolutely beautiful, like amazing movie. If you haven't seen it, if you haven't seen any Wong Kar-wai, like he's an absolute master of what was it, like Hong Kong new wave cinema in the 90s. He's like an absolute beast, and this is one of my favorites of his, if not the favorite. So that's going to be my second recommendation.
Nice. Yeah, no, I've seen some Wong Kar-wai. I haven't seen that one. It's been on my list for a long time.
It's a great movie. I would highly recommend.
Nice.
Bad joke. All right, Dave, what's your third?
Yeah. So yeah, my third was Link Ray, but I'm glad it got mentioned just because like bears repeating. His career is really interesting and awesome, and the only thing I'll add to that is he's got his instrumental stuff's a little more known, but like what's interesting about him, I think, as well, is that he got tuberculosis after serving in the Korean War and actually had one of his lungs removed, and he was told basically that he could never sing again, but he went on to have a whole career where he was also doing a lot of singing, and I think he's got a kind of an interesting voice, especially when you know that. So in addition to his instrumental stuff, if you check out some of the singing stuff with that in mind, he really was just a character. Anyway, though, since I did have a backup recommendation as well, which is just, if you're ever in LA, hit up some diners. There's like a really, it sounds super loose, but like there's a lot of really good, kind of older school diners in LA. And I feel like Pulp Fiction captures this. Obviously, they go to the Hawthorne Grill, which is no longer there, although there is a restaurant, I think, kind of near it, or at least like very similar to it, called Chips, which is still there and is kind of awesome. If you want to hit up some of the diners that Quentin may have been doing some writing in, I know he spent a lot of time in Burbank, so like Frank's up on Olive is great. There's also the Talleyrand, which I used to live next door to, which is another great like kind of old school diner. And like kind of peppered throughout the city, there's all these little like haunts, and places like that all look straight ripped out of this movie and all of the best food. There's one near us called S&W, which is like one of the few areas in Culver City that has not been like gentrified and turned into like a Starbucks or an Erewhon. It's still kind of this old little diner.
Nice.
So if you find yourself in LA, like look up a list of some of LA's best diners, because like they all are really interesting. A lot of them have shown up in movies, and the food's great. Also donut shops. Marcellus was probably going to one of many of LA's like kind of local donut shops. Like the chains aren't as big here. There's all these like mom and pop donut shops that all have like amazing donuts. So I'm sure whatever Marcellus was getting was going to be pretty good before he got run over by that car. So yeah, definitely like next time you're in LA, don't just go to Hollywood or anything. Check out some diners.
Yeah, sweet. What about Jackrabbit Slims? Is that a place that we can go to?
Let me look that up.
Reminds me of they've got like some places
like
in
it's
New
set,
York,
but
like where they got like where
Yeah.
actors will work. You know what I'm talking? Like I've been to one where it's like monster movie themed or whatever. Like someone will be like dressed up as Dracula.
Oh, I don't.
Jekyll and Hyde.
Is that what it's called? That
Oh,
might be what
yeah.
it's called. Yeah.
I'm not familiar with.
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with the diner game, but I am now sort of like jonesing for
Man, I love a diner.
like a nice diner cup of coffee and like a BLT or something.
Mhm.
Just some immaculate vibes in diners. And sometimes they're more charming when the food is like kind of mid, in
Yeah.
my opinion.
We don't have enough of them down here in Miami.
It's like the
Oh.
Waffle House effect. Like like mid food can be kind of good in the right circumstances.
All right, David, what do you got for us? What's your third recommendation?
I'd kind of forgotten that I needed a movie, but I got one. I'm gonna go with Baby Driver, the Edgar Wright movie, which Quentin Tarantino actually contributed in some manner to. He's thanked in the credits, and I think like maybe helped coordinate like a chase or something. Like he had some role. Obviously, Edgar Wright did one of the trailers in I can't remember what trailer did he do in Grindhouse. I know he did one of them. But
Don't.
did he do Don't? That's what I thought. Which is probably the funniest part of that
that was
movie. I think there's definitely some like Pulp Fiction. It's very pulpy, right? Like bright colors, colorful characters, a lot of great music, but also like not just pop obvious choices for the music all the way through. I'm sure a lot of people have seen Baby Driver. I feel like it's a pretty big hit, pretty big recent hit, but honestly, it's kind of like one of the recent movies that it's on like TNT a lot, or like, so it's kind of one of the recent movies that has become like a cable rewatchable for me in a way that a lot of recent movies don't necessarily aren't able to do that anymore, either because they're streaming movies and it's harder to just be like, I'm going to pop in for 30 minutes of a Netflix movie. But Baby Driver, similar to Pulp Fiction in a lot of stylistic ways, but I think also in that way that like Pulp Fiction is very easy to pop in for like 30 minutes, watch one of these little vignettes. Baby Driver's got the same thing where it's like, oh, this is this chase scene with these couple of songs. So I think out of all the movies that are heavily influenced by Pulp Fiction, I think it's one of the better ones. So Baby Driver, Edgar Wright movie is my third recommendation.
Yeah, I like that movie too. And if I can quickly share an anecdote related to it, I saw a screening of Baby Driver when it came out, and it was advertised as Edgar Wright doing a Q&A after, so I knew he was going to be there. But after, the cool thing when Edgar Wright does Q&As is he'll bring, like, sometimes he'll bring an actor or something like that, but sometimes he'll just bring somebody who you wouldn't necessarily think you'd want to talk to or hear from, who worked on the movie, who actually has a really interesting story. And this one was great because it was him and then two actual former bank robbers who were consultants on the film. So like they were the three
Nice.
getting questioned, and it was great hearing them talk about like setting up the crime aspects of it, you know. And there was one part where one of them was like, "Oh, and I play Grand Theft Auto 5 now, and that's how I get my fix." And the other one's like, "Oh, I haven't played Grand Theft Auto yet," and he's like, "Dude, you gotta play it. It's the closest thing to the real thing." And it was like, it's really funny seeing this like real moment between like former convicted felons talking about bank robberies.
That's awesome. That's hilarious. And a great pick. Definitely has a lot of Tarantino vibes, but not in a bad way. And I can see the Pulp Fiction sort of aspect to that movie. Also very soundtrack based. All right, for my final recommendation, I think I'm going to go with another movie. I'm between two, right? So I could go with something that definitely draws influence from Pulp Fiction and Tarantino, but I think I'm not going to go with that one. And I'm going to go with another movie featuring one of the great performances, a movie featuring one of the great actors from Pulp Fiction. Pulp Fiction is probably the crowning achievement for Samuel L. Jackson, like definitely his most recognizable role. Probably should have won an Oscar for it, but you know, that's okay. We still love him. I think probably his next best performance, something that he probably also should have been nominated for, is his role in Snakes on a Plane. So that's going to be my third recommendation, because that movie is awesome, and some of the best acting that Samuel L. Jackson has ever done in his career. No, I will not be taking any questions on that matter.
I was thinking Deep Blue Sea.
Yeah, that would have been another great one.
Two of the great like modern B movies.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also has a great Cable edit.
Oh, yes.
When he's saying, "I've had it with these
monkey fighting snakes."
Yeah, there's so many good ones. I think monkey fighting snakes on this Monday to Friday plane is that's got to be up there for best Cable edits of all time.
I just like that supposedly they were going to change, like Snakes on a Plane was a working title, and Samuel L. Jackson heard they were going to change it. It's like, I will walk if you change the title of this movie. You have to keep it as Snakes on a Plane, and he was right.
Yeah, it's amazing. I used to have that movie on DVD. I would watch it like once a week. I don't know why I don't do that anymore, but I should probably get back to it.
I saw on Amazon that both of those movies, Deep Blue Sea and Snakes on a Plane, have like a double Blu-ray set, and I keep meaning to buy it. It's like $10. Like, it's not a price issue. I just keep forgetting to buy it, but like that's something I really want to add to the collection.
I might do that as soon as we finish this recording.
There you go.
All right, in order to get us closer to purchasing Snakes on a Plane on Blu-ray, David and David, let's do one last run through all of our recommendations. 1, 2, 3, boom, 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 and we'll go same order. So,
all right.
Hit it.
My recommendations are Night on Earth by Jim Jarmusch, Reservation Dogs by Sterling Harjo and Taika Waititi, and Diners and Donut Shops in LA by LA.
I've got the DC Quartet by George Pelicanos. I've got the music of Link Ray. If I had to pick one, I'll go with his self-titled album. And I've got Baby Driver by Edgar Wright.
Nice. I've got Ready to Die by the Notorious B.I.G. I've got Chungking Express by Wong Kar-wai, and Snakes on a Plane by unknown director, but starring the one and only Samuel L. Jackson. David and David, thank you guys so much. This has been an absolute blast. Yeah, thank you guys for joining.
Thank you, man. Happy to be back. This is a lot of fun.
Yeah, this episode could have gone 4 hours. I think it went very long anyway, but I was very glad to have an excuse to sit down and rewatch Pulp Fiction and talk about it, which is honestly one of my favorite activities.
Yeah. If there's a movie that deserved an episode of around 2 hours, I think Pulp Fiction is, as deserving as any other movie. Another great movie. We're very happy that it's in the canon. I'm happy that we got to talk about it. I'm happy that both of you guys were available. Thank you both for joining. Thanks for being great sports with each other. Again, I know it's kind of weird to meet someone for the first time, to just like talk on a movie podcast, but no better movie to bring people together, right?
Yeah, for sure.
2 Daves enter, 2 Daves leave.
Yeah.
Always the best result.
Do you guys have anything to plug? Where can people find you online if they want to chat movies? Or you guys are both on Letterboxd, I assume. Can people follow you there if they want to chat movies?
Yeah, I hit me at Yeeter Travers on Letterboxd. Sometimes I do little bits, and other times I just review the movie normally, and I like it because it's like kind of shouting into a vacuum. Like nobody usually responds, and it's great. I just get it out and then move on. But hey, if you want to follow me and hear some like lukewarm takes about some movies, then go right ahead. And also, I occasionally work in animation and visual effects, so be on the lookout for K-pop Demon Hunters releasing at some unknown time, or go see Ghostbusters if that's your jam.
Hell yeah.
You can follow me on Twitter at DBWilson2, although I'm not as active on there as I used to be. Although more active during the NCAA tournament. I don't know when this episode's going up, if the NCAA tournament will still be going on. And I'm also on Letterboxd. I think I got the same username there. I agree. It's the same way. I have like 4 followers, so it's nice to just be able to post and like not get any response, but feel like it makes me feel more productive about watching movies. Letterboxd, which is what I like about it. Like I wrote a little review.
Yeah,
I did a thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
It feels nice. It feels rewarding. And then
I'm
when
a published writer.
Yeah, exactly. When I don't watch a movie for a while, I feel like Letterboxd reminds me, like, hey, it's been a week. You should watch a movie. Come on, get to it. So it keeps me honest in that regard. Well, yeah, I mean, both of you guys are great follows on Letterboxd and on the Twitter machine as well. So all of our listeners should definitely give you guys follows there if that's their jam. And yeah, I can't thank you guys enough for joining. This has been such a blast. One of my favorite movies has totally informed a lot of my movie loving over the years. So happy that I got to talk about it with the two of you. Looking forward to next week, where we will be talking about yet another essential movie. I don't know what movie it is off the top of my head right now, but I can assure you it will be great. And I can assure you whatever guest or guests that we have on will also be great. So we will see you there. We'll be back next week with more movie talk. And until then, we'll see you in the wasteland.